What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to the Mishmash podcast. Today, my guest is Nicole Saulnier, physical therapist, IDN therapist, and best of all, New York City Marathon finisher. Congratulations, Nikki. That's awesome.
Thank you. It's a huge achievement.
It really is. I can't wait to get to the running portion of our program today.
Yeah,
But so we met through your physical therapy journey, which also, by the way, I think this might be the first time we're talking face to face without masks, because it was either 2021 maybe?
Yeah. I think it was 2021.
Yeah, 20 or 21 that you were over at ProCare in your student phase,
Yes.
right? And now you're a full-fledged PT. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So how does it feel now to have like all the schooling, all of like the interning, all that stuff behind you, and like now you're...
It's honestly awesome. I mean, now I'm in my third year, and that in itself is just wild to me. Like, I was thinking about it, and I actually just, when you did reach out, it was awesome because I'm not super good at taking the time to think about, all of my, like, where I've come from and positively kind of reflecting. I'm always trying to figure out what I need to do better and everything.
Right.
So when you reached out to me, I was like, wait, like, I've really come like a long way. I've really come a long way since I saw him. And I mean, you have too. I mean, you look great, and and I was just like, wow, like it's been a long time. And I was excited to talk to you again because we had a great conversation, and I was just like, wow, I've come a long way.
You have, and I was excited too because I felt so bad. We had such great conversations there, but we were so limited in the office setting. I was always afraid of getting you in trouble, and it was a pretty laid back office, but only to a point. I mean, if it's still an office and, there were jobs there. So I'm excited to, cover whatever ground we get to today. Yes. And yeah, it really was a wild time in general. If you're interested in sort of reflecting a little bit, on the fly here, what was the experience like of being in school at that time during COVID? Like, that had to have been pretty challenging because at one point you had Sue as a professor, correct?
I did.
And wasn't there like certain courses that you guys had to have outside because you weren't allowed in the classroom?
Yes, we were outside, and it was pretty crazy. I mean, we had like something over our heads, which was great. But there was one day, it was so cold. I remember it was so cold, and we were working on the lower extremity, and, Sue's really big about like touch and seeing and feeling. And so we're all getting into like these spandex, and we're just like shaking, freezing on the table, but it was awesome. She was willing to sit there and teach us. And that made a huge difference, I think, for me in my learning experience, which was awesome.
Yeah. And so PT was obviously a passion for you from my experience in working with you. If you don't mind discussing like your journey, like how did you get to be there? Because I know it wasn't like a lifelong interest, right? Unfortunately, there was a specific thing that led you there.
Yeah, actually, if you had met me in high school, oddly enough, I would have told you that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to help people, and I wanted to be in the sciences or some sort of healthcare. But I would have specifically ended with, but I don't want to be a physical therapist, which is wild because I am. I was on a high level like soccer team, and everybody wanted to either be, professional soccer player or a physical therapist, because how do you get close, right?
Right.
And so I just knew that I didn't really want to keep competing with the same people over and over again. So I was like, I know, I'll just not do either of those. So I had never even been to PT at that point when I was saying that. And then I was playing, and I was looking to play in college. And unfortunately, I broke my ankle, and it was a really bad break. And oddly enough, my growth plates weren't fused yet, which they should have been by 17, but they weren't. So my parents opted to go with this one doctor who said, hey, let's put her in a full-length leg cast. And I had multiple casts, actually, because they started with my foot turned in so that they could heal the break, and they slowly straightened it out. So I had, I think, 6 casts is what I have a picture of me holding, like 6 casts at the end.
Oh my God.
And I remember a girl tore her ACL the following weekend on my team, and her and I played our first games the same time because it just took that long for me to recover all the muscle mass I had lost.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Now, thankfully, to ripped and to elite PT in Tin Falls, which you had on.
What are the odds? That's so funny.
I ended up being in a position where I did play in college still. But
oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. So for some reason, I thought that was the end of it. So you were able to go on and continue to play. Oh, that's awesome.
I did. Yeah, I did. I didn't get to play my freshman year. I think I played one game in my freshman year because I finally was back enough. But I ended up playing my sophomore through my senior year, but it was just at a small D3 school, and which is really what molded me into going into PT, because that time period was a really rough time for me, and I didn't know if I was going to get back to the best version of myself as a soccer player, as an athlete, or anything. And I spent way too much time at PT, and I asked way too many questions. And by the time I was at the end of it, I thought to myself, that's weird. I think this is exactly what I want to do. So
it's funny, right? How life works like that sometimes.
Yes. And I am actually the only, I think the only person from my team who ended up as a physical therapist.
Oh, that's funny.
There was a lot of girls who went into it, I think in their, they went into a program at a school, and by the end of their first year, they just were like, oh, that's not for me. And here I was like, that is for me.
And it's an insane amount of work. I don't think people appreciate just how much goes into it, how much schooling, and I mean, it's pretty rigorous, and you're all over the place. It's not like, oh, you go and you sort of have a mentor and you're shadowing somebody and that's it. Like, you had multiple is it residences, internships? Like, how does it?
We call them clinical affiliations, but yeah, essentially they're residencies. They're like tiny residencies.
And were you in Philly at some point for one of them? Because there was a hospital that you were at.
Yeah, so no, I was in Riverview in Red Bank for my hospital one, but I actually went to Delray, Florida for one of mine.
Oh, that's right.
That was my travel story.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That must have been an interesting experience being down in Florida during, that particular time.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. It was really, it was a fun experience. It was a different experience. I thought I was going to stay down there and work there, and then I made my way back up. So
yeah, it seems like you have pretty strong roots and like pretty strong family ties and stuff in general, right? And that's all Jersey based.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and actually I had worked for Sue before I had gone to the College of Staten Island. So when she offered me a job, and it had been something that I had hoped for and envisioned for a long time, I think it was like, I don't think I can go to Florida. I think I have to kind of finish out my time here first.
Right. Well, and I'm a big believer in, just sort of like the path. I feel like you and I are both the type of people to like stress over it and like worry about like what the next move is. Like, we always want to do the right thing, right? 100%. And I've learned that no matter what I think the right thing is, the right thing does eventually show itself. And so I've tried to back off a little bit. Hasn't worked all that well, but it's funny that every step along the way, like it seems like it's funneled you in the direction that you're in now. So I hope that you're 100%. Happy with where you're at, and because I know there's a lot of uncertainty with the path that you were on, and you were you were betting on yourself, which isn't a surprise, like but it's tough when you're a high performing person and you hold yourself to like ridiculously high expectations. People don't realize like even just the slightest deviation from what the goal is can still feel like a failure. So
100%.
Yeah,
that is like that last sentence right there is like a key to, I think, who I've been my entire life, Well,
and that's one of the things that I really appreciated about you. Again, just like you were a phenomenal, like in the office in the PT role, but it was more just in speaking with you as like a person. Like, I think we're both like lovers of learning and, of life in general, I guess, right? Like, there's a lot to offer, and we enjoy sort of like seeking out challenges and challenging ourselves and stuff, which, I guess that's a perfect segue to the jacket that you've earned. So soccer ended in college.
Yep.
And then you were I remember we were talking about running back then. So that was a couple of years ago. So you've been a runner since then.
Yes. Yeah. So at the time when I graduated college, I knew I had to do something to stay fit, because actually I was working for, and again, you've interviewed somebody from here, but I was working for the Max Challenge as a trainer. And so by the time I decided I wanted to go to PT school, I didn't have all of the requirements. So I did have to take a gap year and just finish one anatomy and physiology class. So I took a gap year. I started working as an aide and as a personal trainer, as a group fitness trainer for the Max. And when I was working there, you obviously stay really fit, right? You want to show up and everything. And so I was starting to get into biking, and I was really loving biking. And then this girl who also worked for the Max said, "Hey, I really want to run a half marathon and nobody will run it with me. Like, run it with me." And so I was like, all right, I guess like I'll try. And she's a phenomenal runner. She was a D1 runner, I believe, in college. So she was like, yeah, I was like, okay, I won't be catching you, but I will run. I will run behind you. And so I ran my first half marathon that year. And then since then, I've run a few half marathons. And it usually starts with a friend saying to me, "Do you want to run a half marathon?" But after I ran the Philly half marathon, the New York, putting in for the New York lottery was right around that time. And I had a lot of fun. It was the first time I ran a half marathon in a big city, and it was so cool. And if there's one thing that everybody knows about me, I have this ongoing joke with my friends that I love group. I love being a part of something. I love being on a team. I love being with people. It's super fun. And so everyone tells you that the New York City Marathon is going to be that. Like, you're just going to be with this whole group of people celebrating this really kind of odd thing of just runners running. And I really wanted to do that. So I put in for the lottery, and I got in. I just am super lucky. I think it's less than 5% of people who put in for the lottery get it. It's absolutely absurd. And I found out that I was going to do it, and it had always been something. My dad did it, and we have the plaque on our living room wall, and my dad always talks about it as being like a great time for him and like a very transformative time for him. And I always wanted to do that, but never really thought I could. And when I got that lottery, that email that said like, you're in the 5% of people who are going to get it, I thought for the first time in my life, like, nah, I think I'm supposed to do this. I definitely am supposed to do this. Like, I can do this. And right. I thought it was really cool.
What's the window between when you got that email and November? I'm assuming it was November, right? The marathon was, the marathon was in November. So I think you find out in maybe March. Okay, so a fairly decent amount of time.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, because I think it just closed now. Like to put in for the lottery again. Yes, I did look. I did think about it for a second, but I didn't do it.
Oh, yeah, right. The odds of lightning striking twice too, right? Or do you have, as a finisher, do you get any sort of like leg up for the following year or anything else? Or no,
I think if you do 5 of them, or there's something, if you do a certain number, you finally get kind of like your first try at it. And there's a lot of different ways you can get into it if you want to. So it's not just the lottery, but I just
right. I would imagine there's some sort of like qualify, but at that point you're more of like a circuit runner where you're doing all of these like, sponsored events, and then you have to have times, right? That like qualifying times and everything at them. So
yeah, there's also like a 9+1 program, which is basically you are part of the New York Road Runners like association, and then you run 8 runs or you run 9 runs, and then you volunteer at one. So if you do that in this year, in 2025, you would get to run in the following year.
That's cool.
Which is cool.
Yeah. So wait, have you ever done the Staten Island half marathon? Because I know that one's, from what I understand, that one's pretty brutal because of the hills. It's really different compared to like Philly. I don't know if Boston is as bad, but I know the Staten Island one can get rough. I think it's in May, maybe. The time of year doesn't help either when it's like super hot. It's definitely not fun. I give you any long distance running is such a mental like gauntlet, more so I think than a physical one. And for me, like my biggest fear with trying to do an organized run is like there's so much stuff that can happen, and to have to be like locked in on that day at that time, like I don't know, like I'm always afraid that like, I'm going to eat the wrong thing 2 days before and, whatever. Like what was the preparation like leading up to the actual race itself? And did you have any nerves about, anything really?
Yeah. So, again, I'm kind of lucky in the fact that, the universe just took care of me in that way, because I woke up, so the marathon was on, Sunday. I woke up on Friday sick.
No way.
Like super sick. I had 103 fever. I was so sick. And I never have in my life have I been so about like everything that makes your immune system better, like helps your immune system. I ordered like 6 different types of fish on DoorDash. I was like, you name it, like I was ordering it to my apartment. Instacart came like 12 times. I was just doing anything and just sleeping. And I was really lucky that I had decided to take off Friday and then Monday. And so all day Friday, I just slept. I just took care of myself. Same thing all day Saturday. I'm dry needle certified, so I had a lot of like sinus pressure. So I was like needling my own face. I'm like looking up like different things for like needling for to boost your immune system. I'm like needling myself. I'm having my friend come over. I'm like, can you just stick a needle here? So I was doing anything and everything that I could. In hindsight, I think that was probably the best thing that could have happened to somebody like me, because I didn't have time to worry about a time or nervousness or anything. All I wanted to do was get well enough to get there, show up, and be able to finish it. And I think, truthfully, I really think for, as we've talked about, for people who put a lot of pressure on themselves, I think that was the greatest thing, because there was no pressure by that time. By the time I showed up on Sunday, it was like, if I can run the entire thing and be well, like that's
yeah,
like we're good.
Oh my God. So at that point, most people are worried about finishing. You had to worry about being able to start, like just getting out of bed and get over there. Wow. That makes it an even bigger accomplishment. So you get the notification that you're in. Where were you at training wise? Because I'm imagining by that point you're not out there running 20 some odd miles. So I'm curious what your training looked like to get prepared, and you may answer this as part of your response, but I've heard that most people don't run the full 26.2 during it. Like if you get to a certain point, and I'll follow up with something with cycling because I can relate to that with a goal that I had for myself.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's see, I'm trying to even remember. It feels like it was forever ago. Okay, so I get the email. I was really lifting at the time. I wasn't running. I was lifting at the time. And then I go through the summer and I start off my training, and I'm training really, really, really well. And then I don't really remember. I think I did get sick again. I had a couple things. So what's actually interesting is I was supposed to run it the year before. So when we're talking about March to when I find out that I'm going to run the marathon to when I run the marathon, it's actually a year behind that. So,
oh, wow.
Yes. So I did defer 1 year. So I run I start training. I'm doing really well. And I think I was in the first year of my career, I guess. And I think I just got really burnt out, and it was just too much for me, and I was just lifting. I wasn't running enough, so I decided to defer a year. I didn't realize that I would actually train way worse the second time, so I probably should have just ran it the first time. But again, I put a lot of pressure on myself, so I wasn't willing to just go and run and, feel like that was accomplishing myself. That year I was like, I have to do it perfectly. I have to get close to my dad's time. I have to,
oh, wow.
So, yeah, which his time, I was never going to get that. But I just wanted to be like anywhere within reaching distance.
Right, but to have that goal, it's the same thing, right? When people laugh at us that the kids say that they want to be collegiate and professional athletes, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you won't make that time, and maybe they won't make it that far. But think about how much further you're going to land ultimately, like if you don't push yourself that far, if you don't have those goals. If you walked into it just thinking, I'll give it a shot, there's no way you would have finished with whatever your final time was, I would guess.
Yeah, for sure. And so I would say that I started running, and the truth is I learned that you can do things even if it doesn't go perfectly leading up to it, right? I got sick. There was times in there where I had multiple weddings and things like that where, I should have ran 18 miles that day and I ran 6. And I think what I've learned through that entire process is as long as you keep going, as long as you keep pushing, and like you said, like as long as you work towards a goal and work towards finishing it, I get to say that I'm a finisher, and we could talk times and stuff like that. My time's not impressive, but it is super cool to me that I was able to run 26.2 miles. It's something I never thought I would have been able to do in my entire life. I forget what your other part of that question was. So
the other part was, so you mentioned like the 18-mile run. So I've heard that you don't actually, it's not like, oh, okay, you know, a few days before, let's say, you run the 26.2 and then you go to the marathon and that's what you do. Usually the number I heard was around 20 or 21. Once you can get to that point, then you can actually, you know, expect on race day to perform at that distance.
Yes, that's correct. So I ran 20. That was my top. I was supposed to run a 22 and I didn't end up running it. So my top one was 20. So it was really cool because when I got to 21, even just at the marathon, I was like, well, I could quit here technically because this is the most I've ever run in my life.
Right.
But by that point, you're obviously not gonna end up finishing it. But it was cool because it wasn't just the 26.2. It's like you have from 21 to 26.2, where like every mile you hit, you're like, that's the most, and that's the most, and that's the most. And it really does keep you going.
Yeah, and what you have left just continues to shrink. So when you get to 20, there's, you know, 6.2 left, which is a 10K, and then all of a sudden it's less than that, right? And then that has to be a motivating factor, I would think, too, of like, oh, the finish line is literally getting closer.
For sure. And the crowds in New York are people say it's crazy, but like it is insane. They really do keep you going. There's people who I was at the very end. It's just a constant uphill. I was not ready for. And I remember at one point I was just like, I must have just looked like I was miserable and I couldn't do this. And he just looked at me. He was like, you really can do it. And he like made eye contact with me. And then I just started running faster. I was like, he's right. And I was like, okay, now we got to slow down. Because
right, yeah, you don't want to go. No, well, and that's what I assumed was a part of it too, right? Is the adrenaline factor of the fact that like you have not just like the nerves and just the energy from being there, but also the camaraderie and the support of hopefully the people you're running with and also the fans. Because you mentioned that earlier, right, about that group aspect. Was that something that came into play that day too? Like, did you have sort of like a pod that you made your way through with, or, you know?
So I, because of a patient that I know, I had met a group of people who participate in what's called Achilles, which is they work with runners who have disabilities. So there was, you know, some runners who were visually impaired who are guided by Achilles runners. So I had met them, and there was one girl who was running the marathon for like the 12th time, something crazy. These people run all the time.
Right.
And so it was mostly for most of the run. I think I got to mile 18 with her. And then at that point I was like, hey, you go, because I have to like drop my pace a little bit. But just the fact that like everybody who's cheering feels like they are on your team. You feel like you're on their, like you're all on a support system. It feels really, really cool. And I was lucky enough that my family is awesome, and they had signs and candy, and they showed up to like way too many miles.
Like the checkpoint, right?
Yeah. So it was really sweet. They were like, we joke that I think they ran as much as me that day, just like running through New York trying to get to the next checkpoint. And I remember seeing them at mile 19, and I started crying when I saw them at mile 19. I saw my dad, and I looked at him. It makes me emotional, but like I looked at him, and he said he knew in that moment when we made eye contact, he was like, it was because you just realized that you were definitely gonna finish.
Right.
Like you got to mile 19, you saw us, and you were like you knew, like, I got this. Like, I'm going to do it. It's going to hurt, but I'm going to do it.
Right. Right. Because, I mean, were there any stoppages, like, for, you know, where you slow down to walk, or you just went straight through, like, the full deal?
So I walked every mile for water.
Smart.
Yeah. So, and I think, like, majority of the runners truthfully did. I mean, unless obviously you're an Olympic runner and stuff, but I think, like, majority of the group that I was in, so I was in the last wave, and I think everybody got to the water stops, you walk to drink your water, and then you run from there. So there was that, you know, split time. So
it's funny that you say that, because the runners that I know locally that I consider like real runners, that like, you know, the pace is ridiculous, the distance is ridiculous, they have no problem stopping whatsoever. And back when I was running, I didn't have goals to run a marathon or whatever. I did get up to, I think I ran like 14 miles once, and that was just like pushing myself to try to do it. But the problem was like the mental hang up. I couldn't allow myself to stop. So there were times that I probably looked like a zombie, you know, because I just wouldn't, because I felt like I was quitting or failing or whatever it was. So now that I'm, you know, years later, now that I'm getting back into it again, and I've seen professional runners like yourself, you know, and the other guys that have no problem stopping and starting, whatever, I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll give that a shot, because it's probably smarter I think I was just pushing myself too hard. And so, again, like finishing is finishing. You just have to get from the starting line to the finish line without taking the subway. Because there was one year where somebody did that. They had like a stupid fast time, like an hour 30 or something, which is, to be fair, that's also amazing that they were able to take the subway in the city on a Sunday and have it take only an hour and a half to get there. So
honestly, not a bad point.
Yeah, that's besides that. But so not to dive like too deeply into like the personal side, but it seems like you and your dad have like a really special bond.
Yeah.
Which is cool because that was one of the things that I connected with you with where, my daughter Sarah is. So I'm lucky enough to have 3 kids. She's sandwiched in the middle. So it's perfect because she's the only girl. She's the middle child, but she's the only girl. You're the youngest of 3, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so, again, she's another one that has all these like athletic aspirations and academic aspirations. So it was really, really neat to meet you when I did, because that was at a time where I was like, you have a nephew, right? Who's, how old is he?
He's 2.
He's 2. Okay. So best age ever, because everything is new to them. Every day is an adventure. Like, it's so much fun. And I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like at that age, like you just can't help but project ahead. Like, oh, it's going to be so much fun when this, or when they get to do whatever it is. And so I was in that stage when I met you, because Sarah had just really started on her, her sports journey, and she was setting goals for herself and dreams and stuff. So it was kind of neat to see it was like hitting fast forward and seeing like, oh, okay, look, like here's somebody who had the same sorts of things. I think she might have even still been playing soccer at that point.
Yeah, I believe so.
So that was kind of, it was just kind of cool. But obviously, like, I love all 3 of my kids equally, and I have different relationships with each of them, but I'd be lying if I said that my relationship with her, the daddy-daughter one, wasn't, super special. And it seemed like you had that with your dad.
100%. 100%. My dad, was very similar to you, like growing up. My dad didn't know anything about soccer, didn't play soccer, but as soon as I was like, Dad, this is like the sport that I love, like this is what I'm into, my dad was like full force. My dad like went and got his referee's license. My dad went and got his coaching license. My dad read every book that could ever have been read in the entire world to like make sure that he knew what I wanted and like where he was going to go with me on this journey.
Right.
And I am so grateful. My dad's done that with everything in my life, but I think that's probably why too I was so like, if I can run this marathon, like I really want to run this marathon, because it was kind of my moment to kind of almost like give back to him, like, hey, like you've supported me through all of this. You have, taken me to every soccer game. My dad, I played 6 hours away in college. My dad drove to every single soccer game that I had in my college career. I think there was one that he couldn't go to, and it was like super important. He was going to try to like pretend that he was going to get there. But he drove like 6 hours back and forth on multiple occasions just to watch me play one game of soccer.
Right.
So when I think I crossed that finish line, it was important for me, and I like don't want to ever say that I want to take that away from myself, because I think that, I am somebody who very quickly would be like, oh, I'll give that to this person. I'll give that achievement to this person and everything. So it was a really big moment for me. I did it, but I would be lying if there wasn't a part of me in the back of my head who was like, I'm so glad that my dad gets to see me do this, because I hope he realizes how much he meant to me and how much respect that I have for him. And watching him do this when I was younger, because he really ran it when I was younger, and just kind of, yeah, it's just a really special relationship when you have a daughter and a father relationship, for sure.
And a dad who supports you the way that he does, which is, and that was the thing, like for Sarah, I never even thought about what it would be like to have a daughter. Like, so my brother and sister, they're half brother, half sister. So they grew up together. They're 9 and 11 years older than me. So for all intents and purposes, like we didn't really grow up together in the same household or whatever. The closest was we rented a house in Brooklyn for my whole life. So the landlord's daughter was 2 days younger than me. So in essence, she was kind of like a little sister, But like even then, like I was an only child. We hung out, but not to the extent of like if we lived in the same house. So when it came time, for Sarah, like to be here, I was just like, oh, not that I don't know what to do, but it's like, oh wow, like this is going to be different because I don't know what to do, what little girls want to do, and so I couldn't wait to learn about it. It seemed like something, exciting and thrilling and stuff. So it's cool that your dad had the same sort of mentality with like the sports part of it, and I'm sure other things too, like that it was just like, no, I'm going to adjust myself to, avail myself to to this new wonderful person in my life, which is cool. And like, and it's funny, right? Like, hopefully you relate to this because I know it's going to sound really stupid, but I feel like running, especially longer distances, there's almost like a spiritual sort of feeling to it. Like there's just, I don't know, like, I don't know if it's just me or not. You're nodding, so I guess that's a good thing. Yeah. And so like to have that extra level on top of it must have made it like unbelievably special for the marathon specifically. Like
100%. I feel like you go through like 12 different emotions. Like people ask me about the marathon, and I actually did a cool thing, and I'm finally going to get it done. But I actually got 2 disposable cameras, so that for every mile I took a picture to try to like kind of capture what I was feeling in that moment. I'm interested to see, because I feel like all of them are just going to just like basically like be black blurbs, because I wouldn't stop. I was like, let me just run and also take a picture. But I'm interested to see, because you go through so many emotions. Like on my runs, even, I would sometimes come down here and run at Sandy Hook just because it's easier to get the mileage in, and you just go through so many things. Like I kind of, make sense with this conversation, but I never understood people who would listen to podcasts when they ran. I was like, how do you listen to a podcast when you run? Like, I need music, I need like intensity, like that just sounds too crazy to me. And then I started training for the marathon. It was the first time I ever understood why people do it. And it's because you get so, invested in these conversations and these thoughts and these everything. So there's definitely like points in time where you kind of need that instead of
right, the distraction aspect of it.
Yeah. And you're feeling all of these things. You get to like mile, 14, like is a great example, like 13, 14, and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, okay, music is annoying me now, but I don't want silence, and I have all these feelings and all these things to put towards, and you want to listen to something you're passionate about.
See, I wish I knew what silence was, because, and I'm not throwing you under the bus here, I promise. I've learned that a lot of like high performing individuals, especially ones who've done really well in school, that have the drive that we have, like the brain never shuts off. It never stops. And so for me, at least, like the music aspect of it, I think is important, because I'm so tuned in to the mind body thing where it's like, okay, like I need something heavier here or a higher pace to get me going, or I need something calmer because I'm going too hard into it. I've never thought of like a podcast or something where it's completely like just going on autopilot. So that's interesting. I may have to check that out.
You should definitely try. I don't think it works in that first 5 miles for sure. You definitely,
right.
At least me, I need music. I need to get into it. But yeah, as you start to creep up in that mileage, it's actually, and I would pick something that's, you want like a shorter podcast. Maybe you can start like doing little things.
Yeah, the shorts, right?
The little short podcast. You just want like a short, like, the next 5 minutes to just think about whatever is being brought to you. And a lot of times I've picked like random like historical ones. I'm not good with history. I don't know a lot about history. It's never been a strong suit of mine. So I'd pick these like little short clips about historical things that I could learn in like 5 minutes as I was running. And so then I was like starting to come up with all of these facts, and I was like, okay, now I'm starting to understand. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. You should try it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it's good motivation for me, because I keep saying after every one of these podcasts, there's always moments where I'm reacting to the person. Like, I'm like, oh wow, like that was really deep, profound, moving, whatever. And then after the fact, my wife is like, oh, you should like cut it into shorts or like make, shorter form, I guess, videos or whatever. So that's good. I can have like a motivational section, I'll devote it something for runners so that they can go. And it's funny, you mentioned Sandy Hook. So from when I was a little kid, I guess I'll roll it back a little bit. So I grew up in a part of Brooklyn that was really weird. I think of it as being one part like New York City, so Brooklyn, city stuff, one part Midwest, like values and all that, and then one part like New England coastal charm, because the whole neighborhood was surrounded by water on 3 sides. There was one street in and out, like a little town in the middle of nowhere. The same families, there's at least 12 families that I can think of that have been there since the early 1900s. And my family we've had at least one Beneke there for 96 years or something like that.
Wow.
So it's a weird place. And so, yeah, and it's in Brooklyn. And so, and again too, like I've mentioned it on here before, like, so diversity in Gerritsen Beach meant you were Irish and Italian, the combo, right? And so again, lots of like, traditional values. The it's divided into a new section and an old section. So the old section was the original neighborhood. It started out in World War I as just like barracks, I think, for the soldiers, and then they turned them into bungalow vacation homes, and that's how the neighborhood started. So you've got the old section and the new section, and all the streets are alphabetical. And of course, I heard recently somebody said they were like, oh, it's because it's all Irish people, so the drunks can make their way home. They don't have to know, they don't have to read. They can just follow the alphabet. But I specify that because growing up when I was little, like I loved going bike riding. It just felt like this sense of freedom and adventure and stuff. And like, it would be my mom would sit on the stoop and I could go back and forth on the block and then be able to cross the street. And like each year I got older, it was like I got further and further out. And so, when I was like 6 or 7, it was like, oh, now I can go to this part of the alphabet, and it just instilled this sense of excitement in me. And at the end of what we call the avenue, right? So where the street ended and the water began, you could see the Belt Parkway on the other side. So I just grew up with this like wanderlust of like, I want to go there. It's always something further on the horizon, the next thing. And to me, I just associated with bike riding. So I wanted to do a century ride. And when I met Sue, I don't know if she's done centuries herself, but she's obviously super into cycling and she's got a lot of friends who did it too. So that really inspired me to take it, seriously and train for it. And it was the same thing. She mentioned that just like with marathon running, like you don't have to do the full 100 to be able to do the full 100, if that makes sense. And so long story short, well, it's already long, but I started doing my own training for it. I was supposed to do it with a buddy. He bailed. And I was just like, no, we had gone through that like 6 or 7 times in a 10-year stretch. And I was just like, you know what? No, my gut's telling me this is the time I'm going to do it. And I remember like I could do 30, no problem. 40, 50 was getting up there. Then after I eclipsed 50, I started to think about the route. I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to do this. I need to figure out what I want to do. You know what? Hills, I want to make it, it's going to be an accomplishment and I want to earn it, but I don't want to put myself through, an unnecessary hell doing this. So I made the mistake of thinking, oh, I'll ride to Island Beach State Park and that'll be like, that's the route that I'm going to take. It wound up being 78 miles. And by the end of it, it was 78 miles exactly because in mile 78, I got so fed up with the freaking wind that I literally, like, there was one point where it was coming from both sides. Have you ever been to Island Beach State Park?
No, I haven't. But
so there's a road that the road that goes through it. You've got the ocean on the left and then I guess the bay on the right or whatever. And the wind was coming from both sides. It was holding me up. I wasn't pedaling. I just literally held me up and I got up and I flung the bike down. I was like, that's it. And so 78 miles. And of course, I go to Sue after that, and she's like, well, yeah, wind is way worse than hills. So I was just like, oh. So I had never been to Sandy Hook to do training for that reason. And so, like, yeah, when you mentioned it, I was just like, oh, to run it maybe isn't as bad, I guess, because you're not,
It's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough. It's rough. It's actually one of the reasons I like to run there if I'm preparing for something, just because of the fact that sometimes New York can get really windy, right? Like if you get into certain sections, it's like a wind tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually the reason I like to do it, but it does... I kind of figured that's where you're going to go because I was thinking about it. There was one time where I ran out and then I was running back and I was like, is it possible that I ran against the wind out and then I ran against the wind in?
Yep.
I was like, how am I still going against the wind?
It's the worst. And that's just it. Like a hill, I mean, unless you're going up, one of the Rockies, like a hill is finite. You can typically see the top, and hopefully you're going to go down the other side. So you have a payoff where it's like, okay, like I got the hard part behind me. Now it's going to be easier going down. With wind, especially when it changes direction like that, it is soul sucking. Like I was just like, because there's nothing you can do. Like you're fighting as hard as you can and, not making as much headway. So I do like it from a training standpoint, but not like it for...
No, not for what you were doing, for sure, no.
Yeah, maybe not the Hawaii marathon or whatever, along the coast.
I would love to do that. I actually did, this year I did put in for the Sydney Marathon, but I didn't get it, so.
You've been to Australia,
I have.
Correct?
I have. I thought it would be a great way to go back.
Yeah, so that was a study abroad thing, right, that you did?
Yeah, I studied abroad in my junior year, and it was amazing.
I like that, so that's my dream location to travel to, but I'd have to, get super doped up, I think, for the plane ride or plane rides. Like, I give Heather a lot of credit. So she went to Hong Kong. It was like the 4th of December a couple of years ago. And she's like, oh, it's only 12 hours. Like, only 12 hours. Like, I'm freaking out here. Like, I guess just the concept of being in any one place for that long couldn't hack it. And I remember, it was like 11 o'clock. She was, in the air for however many hours. And I remember I opened up like the app to check where the flight was, and she was over Greenland, approaching the North Pole at midnight in December. And I was just like, oh God, like, hopefully I wake up and she landed safely, because that doesn't seem like the smartest, path to take. Did you fly direct out there, or?
So I flew to California, and then from California to Sydney.
LA, like here to LAX, and then okay.
Yeah, which actually, to be honest, I get what you're saying, but to be completely honest, I feel like the flight to California was way worse. To and from California was way worse than the flight from California to Sydney. To be completely honest, I think there's something, so when you're in the when you get in and you're like, okay, I know that I have like 15 hours. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to read a book. I watched Moana for the first time, which actually, as you were telling the story about, going to the edge and then seeing the Bell Parkway, I was just thinking like, it's like Moana moment,
Yeah, no, that's 100%. That's exactly the spirit of it.
And I watched Moana on the way there. So like I accomplished so many tasks. I wrote letters to people because I wanted to send them when I got there, like about my trip. So I accomplished so much. So to me, it was like kind of how we were talking about, you can't shut your brain off. It was actually a great way for nobody else could ask me to do things. So I didn't have to say no to anybody, or where I have to like worry about saying no to any tasks. Like they were all like, that 15 hours was 100% mine to do whatever it is that I like sought to do in those 15 hours. So you might not hate it as much as you think you would.
So here's the only defense I have of my neuroticism. And why I'm concerned. It's not so much the duration of it. It's the fact that, again, the brain not shutting off. And then I guess being a control freak, or an environmental control freak of sorts, I've slowly come to learn, like this is really weird. I used to take the express bus in from Brooklyn, the south end of Brooklyn, all the way to Manhattan every day, and back from, for school, for work. I would sleep on it pretty much no problem. I could sleep on the subway. I mean, like that seems terrifying to a lot of people from around here, but whatever. But for some reason, like if someone's driving, I can't do it. And I don't know if it's like, I feel like I need to be, ready to help if there's something or whatever it is. And I discovered that I can't sleep on planes when we were flying to Ireland. So that was 7 or 8 hours. And like, we did everything right. It was an overnight flight. We had dinner, had a couple of Guinnesses at the airport. So I was like loosened up, but not, like completely shit-housed. And however, like at some point in the flight, I realized I'm like, the lights are all off. The flight attendants are asleep. Everyone else is asleep but me. And I was wide awake. And so I was up for like 30 hours. Heather and I we landed, we took the bus to the hotel, we get to the hotel and we put the luggage down, and I sat down on the bed and I just looked at her. I was like, I just need to sit for a second. And the next thing I knew, it was 6 hours later. So I survived it, but it's that fear of like, okay, like I'm going to be awake for those 15 hours. And like, so Heather slept for, however much. She got pampered. She woke up to breakfast. She went to sleep after dinner. So if I could, I would probably just need like some sort of like sleep assistance, and then I'd probably be good to go.
Tylenol PM always does a trick for me.
Somebody, I think our pediatrician told me to take Benadryl, and I'm like, you know what? But that's the thing that freaks me out. I'm more of when it comes to like, I'm a big believer in like doctors and getting stuff diagnosed or whatever, but I don't like to take medicine if it's like a Band-Aid, right? If it's not going to fix whatever it is, then I don't want to do it. So I don't take allergy medicine. I don't take cold medicine if I don't have to or whatever. And so I'm always afraid of like, if I take, let's say, Benadryl or an Ambien or something like that like it doesn't work or goes the opposite way. So now I'm freaking out because I can't go to sleep and I'm stoned or whatever. Like that's going to be, a rough one. I'll have to get over the fear at some point, because Australia seems like the coolest place in the world.
I was going to say, you would love it. It's so cool. It's honest. It's just such a cool place. I loved it.
Didn't you did some sort of like road trip or trip within a trip while you were there, right? It wasn't just
I did
like
a few. Yeah, I was lucky enough to do a few. Again, my parents are like so cool. They're awesome people, and they came to see me. So because I was there for like 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, it was.
I was gonna say that is the other thing to your point, actually, that makes sense, because I don't think I slept for most of that flight, if at all any of it. But, and our total trip to get to the campus once we got there, because we weren't in Sydney, we were in Newcastle. So I went with two of my friends. And so when we got there, it ended up being like a 32-hour, I believe, like whole entire travel thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I don't really think I did sleep that much. I maybe got like maybe 2 hours of sleep. So, but when I got there, I had 6 months.
Right.
It wasn't 12 days. It was 6 months. So I woke up and I slept and actually, just to go off on a tangent really quick, but the only thing that that affected that is the birds are really loud in Australia, like really loud. I'm a loud person. If I think something's really loud, like that is huge, right? I remember I woke up, I'm like in a daze because we had gotten there, we had slept, and then I really hadn't slept, so I was gonna sleep like 12 hours now, right? Plus the time difference is like 11 hours. It's something crazy. And so I remember I was sleeping and I just got woken up and I was like, what pterodactyl
Oh my God.
is outside? I remember waking up, and then you wake up and I'm in a place that I have never been in my entire life. Like, I got here at night, it was pitch black. Like, now I'm looking around, I'm like, I think I'd had one drink when we got there too. I'm like, what happened to me?
The world's upside down.
I'm like, there's a pterodactyl outside. Where am I? I'm like freaking out. I look outside. It just so happened that I had a huge tree right outside of the place that I was living, and all of the birds were just sitting like directly where I
They're
was.
like, who's the newcomer?
Level.
Yeah,
they were like directly sitting right there, and I was like, oh my God, this is the loudest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And so that's one thing I always tell people. I'm like, if you get there and you think the birds are like little pterodactyls, they are, but they're harmless.
So my memory just sort of flared up when you met. I don't know what it was that you mentioned, but I remember you gave me a pro traveling tip, and I'm trying to pull it out. I'm pretty sure you said that there was a place where you could like hold koalas, or was there,
yes.
Right? Am I making that up?
No, you're not. Kangaroo Island.
Kangaroo Island. Oh, so my brain was telling me it's got a funny name, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Kangaroo Island. Okay, yeah. You want to talk a little about Kangaroo Island?
Yes, I love kangaroo. This is like my favorite topic of conversation. So talking about like, bringing it full circle, in the very beginning when we were talking about how you always end up where you're supposed to be, right? So my parents come to visit me and they say, hey, we're going to do all these trips, whatever. They plan out this awesome trip with my aunt and my uncle, who are really awesome people too. And they're all going to come, and they're supposed to go to the Whitsunday Islands. And I can't remember if I was actually supposed to go with them at the time or not. But we're supposed to go to the Whitsunday Islands, which is beautiful. Whitsunday Islands unfortunately got hit with a very horrible hurricane at the time and totally took them out. Like, there was nothing left. They took many years to build it up again. I think it's fine now, but it had taken a lot of time. And so we're supposed to go there, and they're like, okay, now we're not going to the Whitsunday Islands. What are we going to do? My mom, I think, just like randomly called, like this travel person was like, what do I do? Whatever. Maybe she did research. And she goes, we're going to go to Kangaroo Island. And like, what? We're going to go to Kangaroo Island. What are we going to do? Go look at the kangaroos? I'm like, Mom, I can look out my window and I could see like 12 if I really wanted to. She's like, no, we're going to go to Kangaroo Island. This was the coolest part of my entire experience.
Wow.
We got there, and there's wildlife reserves. There's all of these amazing places you can take pictures and hike and go in caves. And there's so much to do. And just this little island called Kangaroo Island. And we saw all different types of kangaroos. I was hanging out, I was lounging with a kangaroo, my arms around the kangaroo, because they're so sweet, because they're like in a little wildlife reserve, and they take such good care of the koalas. And, everywhere else you go, like, the koalas look a little sick, a little like, and you're like, are they really there?
Right.
They're like, don't touch the koala. They're like, go next to it and take a picture. We held this koala for like, my mom held it for like 40 minutes, and she's just sitting there feeding it, and she's just like, and it's just like eating her hair and like touching her. And my mom loves koalas. So when I told her I was going to go to Australia, my mom was like, this is perfect. The number one thing I'm going to do is visit my daughter, but I'm really just going to
go for the koala.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, yeah, and it was just an awesome experience. So I tell everyone, I tell my patients, I have a patient right now who's like, I think I might go to Australia. I'm like, Kangaroo Island. I'm like, you have to go to, I don't care how hard it is to fit this into your trip, you have to go to Kangaroo Island. So everybody listening, go to Kangaroo Island.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And So you went through school. Did you go? You went with a friend, right? Or did you go?
There was
by
four
yourself?
of us from my school.
Oh,
Yeah, there was four of us from my school. So I went with a girl who I'd played soccer with, who I was really good friends with. I was living with her in at Juniata, and then we didn't live together though in Australia. And then a girl I became really close with, Christy, who was there at the time, and then a girl I also knew, Amelia. So the thing about my college where I went, it was 1,600 students. So I pretty much knew my entire campus anyway.
Yeah.
But it was a great way for all four of us to get close. But what was nice is even though we did get close and even though we did hang out with each other, we all very much had our own experiences while we were there, which was cool.
yeah. Just for comparison, when I was in high school, my high school had over 5,000 kids. Like we had so many, we had a split schedule. It's 7 floors. It was too much.
Wait, that's insane.
Yeah, it was a lot. Which I always laugh, especially here, like locally, like, you know, a graduating class of like 200. I was like, we had 400 who didn't graduate that were of age and should have, which is crazy. So did that spark any future, you know, plans for travel or do you have, because I know what I've seen happen is people take huge trips like that, whether it's a cruise or just their own sort of adventure, and it gives them that like bug, the travel bug to go and, you know, check out new places. Do you have that? And do you have any, you know, cool trips on the horizon that you're looking to do?
So unfortunately, ever since the start of my PT career, I really haven't. I think the first year that I was a PT, I was in a ridiculous amount of weddings. So literally all of my PTO went to weddings.
Right.
So I
and the PT paychecks, because it doesn't get any cheaper.
Not to mention the fact that I'm like, okay, so now I have doctorate level loans.
Right.
I also am in all these weddings. I felt like 27 dresses. I just like kept going. And I also think I was so fortunate in my life to be somebody who got to travel a lot. You know, I went to Ireland. I got to play with my college soccer team in Ireland,
right.
which was awesome. I went to Australia. While I was in Australia, I went to New Zealand. You know, I went to Italy when I was in high school with a high school
I didn't realize
trip.
that.
Yeah. At Middletown South, I think they still do it, but I'm not sure. They did a trip to Italy if you were in the Italian Honor Society. So I went there. So I think there was a period of time in my life through high school and college, and my parents wanted to travel at that time in my life because I am the youngest. So they were like, well, I guess you're coming with us. You know, I think during that period of time in my life where I traveled a lot and college too. And then after that, when I was in PT school and after PT school, I really haven't done a lot of traveling. So that's actually on my bucket list is to this year start. I have a lot of friends in different places in the United States. So I think my goal right now is to be like, all right, how many states can we conquer? You know, I'm about to be 29. So I'm like, can I do 30? And, you know, before 30, we'll find out. So
That's cool. Yeah. And it's funny, most of my friends in college, we went in opposite directions. So Heather and I wanted to do all of the states stuff because, again, for me growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. Like there were no Disney trips or whatever. We had family vacations, but it was always like sort of whatever was local. So I think by the time I graduated high school, I had been to like every New England state. We were as far west as Pennsylvania, as far south as like West Virginia, okay. Which again, I know that specifically because the girl downstairs had family in North Carolina. So she rubbed it in my face every year that she had been further south than I was. And so we made it a goal, Heather and I, to eventually try to go to all 50. Whereas most of our friends in college, they went to Costa Rica, they went to the Dominican Republic, they did, you know, European trips or whatever. So we're the only ones that I know that have traveled as extensively as we have, like in the States. So if you're looking for any suggestions, I'm happy to oblige.
Oh my God, yes.
We've been all over the place. And actually, it's funny. We took the kids cross country so that not to get sidetracked. So we tried to drive to Alaska. I don't know if I ever told you that. So we tried to drive from Staten Island to Alaska in 2008. We got to within 15 hours and had to turn around because of a number of reasons. The real reason, truthfully, was we were just burnt out from driving.
God.
We made it from Staten Island to Hammond, Indiana in one day. That was 15 hours. We made it from Hammond to northern Minnesota, another 12 or something. They didn't believe us at the border when we were coming back into the States that it had been only 5 days. They were like, okay, wait a second. We have you registered in near the Manitoba entry point up in Minnesota. How are you over here now? Like they thought we were like smuggling something. It was crazy. But what happened was just all that time on the road, like I started having a panic attack in Alberta because I couldn't take the sight of like, the road going under the car anymore. And we made it to
so how many hours total was this?
So to that point, so we made it to Dawson Creek, which is hilarious. What a great name for a place. So we made it to Dawson Creek in British Columbia in 4 days. And that was probably almost 60 hours of driving in 4 days. Like we pretty much were just in the car. But the funny thing is we still did a whole ton of stuff. So it wasn't like, oh, we just drove hotel to hotel, restaurant to restaurant. Like we got out. Our big thing is we visit the state capitals because a lot of times the interstates go through them. Like in Iowa, let's say, there's really not a whole hell of a lot to look for. And so once you cross the Mississippi, like Des Moines was right there. The Capitol building looks like a palace. So it was just really cool. And, you go inside and it's like a museum too. There's all kinds of cool stuff to see. So we were like, all right, this is a great way to break the trip up. So we did that through Canada too. They're just much further apart. And so we made it to the Alaska Highway. We actually made it 250 miles along the Alaska Highway. And it was funny. Like we both woke up feeling like not right that day. And the further north we drove, the darker the sky got, where we were just like, oh man, like, and we had this little tiny Toyota Echo that was, going to get blown over in a strong gust. Right. And we had driven for almost an hour and did not see a telephone pole, did not pass another person, did not see a house. And we were like, the isolation of it was starting to eat at us. And I remember I went over a hill at 70 and the whole road was washed out in a mudslide. And thank God I managed to like not flip us over. And like Heather and I just sat there in silence for another half an hour. And then finally, like the thought at that point was creeping up, like maybe we should stop and turn around because we still had a whole ton of stuff to do in the States, like further south. It wasn't like, oh, we were going to just go there and come home. Like we had more of a trip to do. And I remember I just stopped in the middle of the road, like on the double yellows, and there was nothing coming. So it didn't matter. And I was just like, I think we should stop. And she was just like, I've been thinking that for the last like 3 hours. I'm not kidding. We turned around and we wound up seeing a rainbow further up. The sky just kept getting lighter and lighter. And we looked at each other. We were like, I think we made the right decision here. We went to Mr. Mike's. We got a beer at Mr. Mike's. Once we made it back to Dawson Creek, it was like, oh my God, it's civilization. There's people. And so I said, I'm like, okay, we're going to have to do it at some point. So we did all, 48 contiguous states. We had done Hawaii for the honeymoon, but Alaska was just that thorn in my ass from 2008 until 2017. And I was like, you know what? The kids are just old enough. We're going to do this. So we ticked that off the list. And then we did a big road trip in 2018, cross country to get the last capitals that we missed.
Oh my God.
So
awesome.
a lot of fun travel, but
holy cow.
so we've done all 50 states and I've done 10 out of 14 Canadian provinces. So I'm looking to get to 12 this summer. We're going to take the kids and we're going to drive up. I've never been to Quebec, so we're going to go up that way. And I'm trying to get a quick little like mini trip in a trip to fly from Montreal to Newfoundland. And so we'll say that's going to be like the big adventure for the summer. But any stateside travel or Canadian travel you're looking to do, I'm happy to, give some suggestions because
oh my God, that's awesome.
It's pretty neat.
So what would you say was your favorite place or most interesting place in your 50 states travel?
So there's an asterisk with that. So Hawaii and Alaska were the best two. They're the best two places I've ever been. So it's not even really fair in my mind to sort of compare them to the contiguous states because there's nothing really that can compete on the same level. There's all kinds of beautiful things. But I will tell you, out of all of the places that I've been besides those two, Wyoming was the one that I fell in love with immediately to the point that my whole dream as a writer is to be able to earn enough for my books to go and buy a cabin out there to go not live, not like settle there, but like do months of, writing and stuff out there. So
oh my God,
that was one of the most, it's funny to go full circle. This was the dream that little kid version of me, I never knew that he had. Because the experience of finally making it to Ohio, which was just like, it had been another thorn in my side. But to go from the city through Pennsylvania and then to hit all this farmland, like most people bitch about having to drive through, the flyover states. I loved it. I had never seen anything like that before. It was so flat. It was so cool. And then all of a sudden you get to western Nebraska And then there's just these giant like boulders. It's like hilly and stuff, totally unexpected. And then the first time I saw the Rockies come up over the horizon, blew me away. I had never been to mountains like that before. So that whole experience, like, it's something I can't recommend to people enough, because the beauty of, especially if you grew up in New York or New Jersey and you haven't traveled a lot within the country, you can see everything just going from New York to California, because then you get into the mountains, which is its own thing, and then all of a sudden you get to the western end of Colorado and it just turns to dust, and that's all Utah and Nevada. It's just dust and sand and craziness. And then you get to Arizona and it shifts to like this crimson color, like the color like the seat cushions, and then you're California, so palm trees and everything. So I can't recommend that highly enough. And there's so much to see and to do along the way. Like, again, Heather and I stopped at, do you remember the Pony Express from school? That was like the precursor to the Postal Service. Okay, so the people that like delivered the mail. So we found in Gatlinburg, Nebraska, I think, like one of the original Pony Express stations or something. I mean, you and I could barely stand in it. Like, it was like that small. But that was an excursion we did. One time coming home, I think in the Alaska trip, the failed Alaska trip, we had the atlas that I was using, which tells you, right, how long ago this was. Forget about GPS, or like, we had printed out MapQuest directions.
Oh my God.
And we wound up on some guy's farm by mistake in Saskatchewan. And the only reason I knew that, because it was one of those weird things where it was like, oh, stay right. But it was like, my gut said we should turn right. So we just sort of like, we didn't do the right thing, clearly. And we wound up on some dude's farm while he was in his like combiner thing, like coming towards us. It was wild.
Oh my God.
But like the atlas that we had was from Walmart. And so we looked and it said, oh, the first Walmart, there's a museum in Bentonville, Arkansas. It's a 20-minute detour from where we are coming home. Let's do it. So we've been to the first Walmart. Like, again, just stupid shit like that. But
that's awesome.
That's where like memories are made. Like I have a sign in the bar area that I have over there that I got from a yard sale in Arkansas, because who the hell goes to, who do I know has ever been to a yard sale in Arkansas before?
Never been to yard.
and I pretended to be I guess mute, because I was so afraid of opening my mouth and having them hear the New York, New Jersey accent. I was just pointing and grunting at things or whatever. So I might have even gotten a discount because they probably felt bad for me. But yeah, so like that kind of travel I think is super fun and important. Not that there's nothing, I don't have anything against international travel, but I think people just sort of overlook what we have here
100%.
And check it out.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, this all sounds so awesome. It's really something I do want to do. I would love to drive cross country, because my brother's done it, and he says that he raves about it the same way. He's just like, there's just stuff you'll experience that you wouldn't experience if you're just flying to different places,
So your brother, you have two brothers, correct?
I have two older brothers, yeah.
Okay, and they were both athletes as well?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So I was curious, not to make a sharp left turn from the travel section. I was curious, from your experiences growing up as a soccer player and as a young athlete, as a female athlete, in a household with male athletes, there's a lot to unpack there. But I'm curious, like in terms of your brother, both brothers were involved with sports.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about what their background was and if it overlapped with yours?
Yeah. So I think that is one thing that is very interesting, is that my eldest brother was a hockey player, and then my middle brother, was a football player, and then I was the soccer player. So at a young age, we all played hockey, which was super fun. And then
ice hockey or roller hockey?
No, roller hockey.
Okay.
Yeah, they both played ice hockey, but I was a roller hockey girl. And then as we got older, that's the sports we all kind of found ourselves falling into. My poor father, who just wanted somebody to play baseball or softball, and
0 for 3.
All of us were not interested. My eldest brother, I think my dad said, was like, nope. My middle brother was like, this is not it for me. And then I played for like 3 years. I played softball. My dad was like, yes. And then I was like, soccer. They're both. My eldest brother, Dan, he's 6 years older than me, and then Matt is 3 years older than me. So I think on top of the fact that we had differences because of sports, just the fact that I chose soccer, which thankfully in New Jersey is a very big female sport. It's very popular. And I think growing up in Monmouth County too, I definitely didn't experience the same kind of hardships that I think a lot of female athletes do, just because I do think that Middletown especially was very like pro sport, pro females in sports and things. And like I said, my dad was obviously rooting for me no matter what. Like, right. He was like, you're no different, But on top of that, my eldest brother being 6 years older than me, it's not a huge difference, right? But there is differences, right? We were both raised a little bit differently in my household. We both had technology at a different time, in our lives. So there is some differences there. But we definitely had some different experiences just being males and females. For me, I think the biggest one that I think of truthfully is that I had a harder time finding a place to play where it was competitive, right? Like I didn't feel like I was just dominating, but I also it was hard to find competitive without being with girls who were going to go play in professionally, right? And I think that was really, really hard where my brothers could find that niche for them, right? Because there was a lot more opportunity. There was people who wanted to play super competitively, who were good at their sport, but the reality is they wouldn't have ended up in professional settings, and nobody took them less serious because of that, right? They were taken still super seriously. And I feel like for me, I was constantly moving from team to team to team to team because teams were folding, because girls were like, well, I'm not going to be professional, so I'm just not going to keep playing. Well, I'm not going to be a professional, I'm not going to keep playing. And parents were even like, well, she's not going to be a professional, why are we going to go to all these tournaments and stuff? And so my dad and I say like my dad, because my dad was really, I think, the big one in kind of finding places for me, but it was always like, how can we find some place where Nicole feels like she's challenged, she's motivated, she's pushing herself, she's, I did want to play in college so she can take those opportunities, but is not playing with girls who are Olympic athletes, because I wasn't that, I was just good, And I think that was, my brothers had an easy time doing that and finding that, and they just stayed on the same team, or like the same 3 teams. And I was on like 8 different teams in 5 years, And it's insane. And not because I couldn't get along with people. It was like, okay, this team is doing really well, and we won 3 games, but all of a sudden nobody's paying, coming to practice anymore, and nobody's doing anything because there's this dance and there's that. And like, well, she doesn't need to spend that money to go down to, Florida and blah, 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 because she's not going to be that good anyway. So, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we have nobody left on the team to play except for these 3 girls that have to go find somewhere else.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, right? Especially about like the dance and the other things. Another aspect of this that I was curious about is I've heard that there's a precipitous drop off. I think it's around 13. I'm not sure if it's exactly 13 or 14, somewhere between 12 and 14.
Yes.
The engagement of girls in sports, especially like recreational or travel level sports versus, high school sports, let's say. It's just the enrollment plummets. And nobody's been able to give me like a specific answer why, but what we've sort of crowdsourced is that it's sort of like a double-edged sword. One is, again, the expectations of, well, she's not going to be a professional, so why bother putting the time into it? And then also this almost like feeling of like defaulting towards social norms, right? Like where socializing suddenly becomes more important. And that was something that a lot of people have cited, that like, oh, she got into makeup and boys or whatever, and so didn't have time for sports. Not to put you on the spot, and obviously not to make you representative of, the entirety of the female gender. Did you see any of that, like either within your friend group or just your age group, where like, let's say you had 50 girls that you knew at, 7 or 8 playing soccer, but then by 17 or 18, did it whittle down to 5, something to that effect? 100%.
I think even just before I answer that, I just want to say, the one point that you made is, and I kept making is, oh, well, she's not going to become a professional. But even as I got older, that language changed from, oh, she's not going to be a professional, to, well, it's not like she's going to make a lot of money being a professional, right? So I think that's another point that I don't know that I've seen a lot of people bring up, but I love Mia Hamm, right? I love Christy Pierce. I had all of these people to look up to, but the reality was, right, if you were going to be a professional athlete, you also had to do a lot of other things, because as a female, for me growing up as a female professional athlete, well, that's not enough money to like live and sustain yourself. So you better be opening business opportunities. So you better get a business degree, because you better know that, or take business classes. So it wasn't, at some point, that's where the other words changed. It's like, I'm not going to be a professional, but also these people are really cool. But at the same time, like, you can't just be a professional athlete as a female. So you might as well, not just keep focusing on it, because you probably you can't do forever. Once you decide you want to have kids, like, you should just give up. So like, I think that's another important aspect to longevity of what, being a professional athlete for a female. But yeah, I definitely, I had a lot of people who I was friends with and who, by the time I was a junior in high school, maybe even a sophomore in high school, I wasn't going to dances because I was flying to this place or this place to get, to a showcase tournament in order to get into college. And a lot of my friends didn't understand that. I remember I had a whole group of friends who, I couldn't go to all of the things that they were going to because I had practice every day. I went from high school practice to college to if you were going to go to a RIPT, you were doing agility training. And my friends didn't understand that. So I had friends who had stopped playing sports, who were focused on something else in life and everything, who then I stopped getting invited because I couldn't go. And then when I could go, I still wasn't invited.
Right.
And that was definitely difficult as well. So I think that to your point of that some girls do get to the point where they're like, well, I can't have a boyfriend and have a friend group and play sports, and I won't make money if I play sports, plus there's a time limit on it, and so therefore probably shouldn't focus on that one. And my parents want me to focus on, academia anyway, so I'll just go into that and then I'll go to the boys and the this and the that. So yeah, I think that I definitely saw a lot of people branch off from it. And granted, I have a couple friends who were really great about it and they were super supportive and everything, but
no, and it's definitely understandable, right? Like I think it has to, it's almost like a tripart sort of focus where like you have to have a certain viewpoint, a perspective of the world on your own to be confident enough in yourself and comfortable enough not be like you don't have so much of your own self-worth and value tied into your social status or standing, right? So you have to be that kind of person. Then you have to have the support from your family that they believe in you, that they, understand your vision for yourself or whatever, because, there has to be an offset. Like if you're losing friends, like you need the support to come from somewhere. 100%. And then the other part of it of like, again, dealing with all those other challenges, which that's such a great point. I never even thought of that. And going back to like the 90s and early 2000s, like, I was just running through it in my head when you mentioned it. Like the only financially viable like female sport I can think of was tennis, where there was enough notoriety with an asterisk, okay? Enough notoriety because in a lot of instances, and this drove me nuts, it was more for appearances and aesthetics than, than skill or whatever. Anna Kournikova is the first one I can think of, right? Like even Annika Sorenstam, like certain... I just remember appearances being mentioned or uttered in the same, same breath as their skills and everything. And even then, obviously, like the LPGA, the women weren't making nearly as much as the men. And then I'm sure tennis, it had to be the same sort of thing. It probably still is. I know I've heard things about, I remember Djokovic coming out against some sort of equal pay thing or whatever, which was crazy to me. I do feel like things have improved a little bit, thanks in large part to the women's national soccer team.
Yeah.
Like they, to me, I mean, I was never really into soccer to begin with. And when I did with Sarah, it was largely due to them. Like it was, to me, they were better than the men. They were, a bigger draw. And I remember that's actually really, now that I think about it, when my eyes were open to like the real, like horrific disparity between them, because the women were winning everything, all the World Cups, all the championships, everything. And the men were still smoking them on the pay scale. And the men were like, yes, there were some names that were notable, Landon Donovan or whoever, but like it wasn't really enough. The women were way more marketable. They were way more successful. They were way better. Like, and so that's when I was just like, oof, like that's really bad.
Yeah.
And then basketball, obviously basketball's, where the focus is. And I don't know if you had seen this. I think it was in the bubble in 2020. They had a weight room set up. So the boys had like what looked like ripped, right? Like this entire like world-class, like amazing setup. And then the girls had what looked like a 2-star, Best Western gym setup, like a couple of dumbbells in the middle of nowhere. That was a big watershed moment because that's when a lot of people realized, whoa, wait a second, like what's going on here? Did you remember that? Or
Yes, yeah, I do. I do remember that, and I remember thinking, like, thankfully because I went to a really small school, there wasn't too much of that. But when I think about it, like in terms of learning how to lift, even like bringing that to even bringing it to a younger age, like learning how to lift and different techniques and things, it's always like it's kind of more focused on the male body.
Because you do powerlifting. When you say lift, just so everybody knows, you're not just talking about like curling dumbbells. Like you're talking like deadlifts and things like that.
Yeah, deadlifts, power cleans, right? You're talking about an athlete who needs power cleaning, hang cleaning, anything, squatting. Women's bodies are different, and I'm probably even more different in terms of just when you sit down with a team to train them to lift. Right now, I have the physical therapy's perspective from that. It looks very different than if I have a group of guys, right? Because the group of guys is probably going to be a little bit more similar in, are we doing a high bar squat, low bar squat, right? A front squat, especially in a high school age group, they're a little bit more similar. So maybe the weights are different and everything, but I probably can. It takes me longer to be like, okay, this female's body is a little different than that one, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And so you kind of have to figure out what's going to work for them. And I feel like even in college, I remember we had a really great lifting coach. He didn't work with us, right? Like that he wasn't working with us, right? Somebody else was working with us. And granted, he taught them well, don't get me wrong, but we were trying to all fit the same mold, and the reality is men and women, neither one of them fit a whole mold, right? You can't take a whole team and be like, oh, you're all gonna do it this way. But I definitely feel like there was less emphasis on the fact that we all had very different bodies, and different bodies depending on the part of the cycle we were in, right? Like how nobody was talking about that. Nobody was talking about how that would have an effect on us. And I think that girls probably could have been more successful on my team in lifting if somebody just kind of tweaked it to be what they needed it to be, right? They were a smaller stature or a larger stature, whatever it may have been.
Right. And again, another misnomer, right? Like just smaller stature doesn't necessarily mean weak. It doesn't mean, it's strength is proportional anyway, right? So
100%.
It's, if you have somebody who's, cleaning their body weight or something, like that's absurdly strong. But that may be a lesser number, just pure, weight that's on the bar, compared to something that a male
and are
is
you
doing,
like,
so.
and like somebody who whose hips are made to face their feet are facing forward in a squat, you know what I mean, versus a wider squat. Like I remember getting forced into this, like, put your feet forward, put your knees forward. Like I am, that is not my build, right? The size of my waist and the size of my legs are two very different sizes. I am not built to sit in this like very squared posture. That's not my build. But yet I was being asked to do that as if I, to the girl next to me, could do the same thing. And then I'm getting yelled at because I'm not getting into the depth of the squat that I need to get. And she is. And I'm looking at it like, but if I move my legs out here, I can do the same depth as her. And it's like, well, but that's not a squat. It's like, no, it is. It is. It's my squat. I don't know. No,
but that's important. And then like just the hormonal changes too, right? Have to have, I would imagine, a huge impact, at least, I don't want to say on the nutritional side, but in terms of like the mass development. If you're trying to put on lean muscle, like I would imagine there has to be some sort of impact based on where you are, like you said, in your cycle, or, having that come into play too. So it's
100%.
And that's why, like, so I love the trainer that we take our kids to for basketball, right? So Zach Leach over in Hoop Lab, it's gender blind, if you want to use a term like that. The girls are treated the exact same way as the boys because there are no boys or girls, they're just hoopers, right? And that's it.
Awesome.
The level of expectation is exactly the same. And he's a big proponent of a failure being a part of it. So when you walk in, the bar is here. You may be here, and that's okay. We're not expecting you to be here. We're here. And so I love that approach, and I would love to see that sort of branch out into more arenas, especially the fitness side of it, especially strength training, in terms of the expectations. But to jump into what you were saying, like the execution portion of it, like, no, there needs to be a focus, at least on the fitness side, right, of, giving enough care, the same care that a male trainer would give to a male client to, help a female client maximize her goals and her strength. And it's going to take a little bit of a difference. Because like you said, the body types are all different. I don't know how big of a difference this is, but like younger athletes versus older athletes, if someone's had a child or multiple children, their bodies may be different than they were pre-birth. So yeah, and it's just, I don't know, like it just drives me nuts that there's still that like inequity in the attention that's given to it and the importance that's placed upon it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even like you said, the gym, like that is insane because it's like that's just objectively, like, how could you not look at it and be like, oh yeah, they get this and they get this? Like, that's so crazy. And I think it happens more often than it should in a lot of different aspects. And, you know, even from, it's a really simple thing, and I think a lot of places have fixed this now, but to be completely honest, I remember during we were playing in the state championships for my soccer team, and, you know, the code is you wear white on white. You wear white on white, and when you're at home. And I remember, like, I think every girl has a problem with that, right? Like, I think every girl is like, like, if I am going to wear white shorts, it's because I made the decision to wear white shorts that day, knowing what I know about myself and my body. And I remember playing in the state championships, and we went into overtime, and then we went into overtime, and then we were on a kick out. And I remember just standing there thinking to myself, this is now how many hours that I've been in white shorts, given where I am, because I haven't had the time to go to the bathroom, and I'm spending the entirety of that game now just, like, looking, right? And I just remember thinking to myself, like, God, if I ever coach soccer, like, they're not going to wear white shorts ever. Like, they're just not going to wear white shorts ever. And that's so simple. That's, like, a very simple thing. But, like, that took my head out of the game so much, because I was just sitting there thinking, right, because it was a state championship game, so there were fans, and that meant there were boys, and there were friends, and that is so embarrassing for a girl. And I remember just being like, wow, I'm potentially about to be a state champion. And I'm thinking about how many hours I've had the same, like, protective wear that I've had on.
Right.
Like, that's insane, you know, for that to even have to be a thought on a 16-year-old girl's mind.
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
No, it's right. And change can be just so glacially slow, right? Especially here. Like, our country has always had more of, like, a patriarchal sort of paternalistic view, right? Like, it's funny, people talk about, like, the golden era being the 50s or whatever, but if you look back, like, women were not valued. They were still viewed as property. I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to give the specifics, but Heather was giving me these crazy stats that she found out recently of, like, I want to say it was like a woman wasn't allowed to apply for a business license without a male's approval as late as, like, 1986 or 88. Like, and there's stuff that's even worse that's gone further. And I feel like I've seen things in terms of, like, athletic wear and things of that nature that are more geared towards, you know, feminine hygiene and helping with those sorts of things. So I'm hoping that that's, like, a step in the right direction, because it is, like, that's such a valid concern and valid point. And I don't know, like, the uniform thing drives me crazy too. I don't know if it was Shane Gillis, a comedian. Somebody made a point about the women's uniforms for basketball or volleyball. It was a certain, like, indoor sport. And I mean, the shortest of short shorts that you know, and he said something about it, like, and they were like, oh, it's for performance wear or whatever. And he pointed out that I think it was the Paralympic squad or whatever. They were like, they're not wearing the same uniforms. They look nothing alike. So if it's a performance-based thing, then, and let alone the male counterparts, like, I always laugh at that. Like, put the boys in the girls' uniforms and let's see if it's the same thing, right? And, like, but it goes both ways. Like, so obviously, I have more of a problem with the objectification of it, right? So the super short, whatever it happens to be, midriff shown and all that kind of stuff. But it does go the other way too, where, like, you know, when the girls just get, like, boy uniforms and they don't fit correctly, like, it's just, I don't know, like, it doesn't seem like it's that difficult to put some care into the development of products that, you know, maximize the athlete's performance. Like, athlete, hard stop. Doesn't have to be female athlete, male athlete, like, whatever athlete we're talking about, there should be something for them to, you know.
100%. Even goes down to, I had such a hard time growing up wearing cleats because I have a fat foot. Like, I just do. It's just a fat foot. And I couldn't find female cleats, even, like, double wide was, like, not wide enough for my foot. But then the male ones, in order to get wide enough, were too big on my foot. And so now I have foot problems because I just squeezed my toes all of my life. But yeah, I think even as simple as that, like, you know, people pushed for, like, oh, okay, women's have to be a little bit more narrow, but then it was like, oh, okay, but all women now have to be more narrow.
Right. And I think that's a perfect segue to, like, the reasoning behind it, right? Because it's always the same bullshit stuff that I hear. So the reason I would imagine why there aren't more triple or quadruple wide cleats that fit they'll come back and say, well, there's not enough of a proportion of the population to make it financially justifiable, would be some bullshit thing they throw out there. And the same reason with, women's basketball, the WNBA versus the NBA. Well, the women aren't enough of a television draw, so they're not going to get the advertising dollars or whatever. And I understand it in the sense that, like, at one point, the New York Liberty were playing in Westchester, and they weren't even selling out that gym. Like, imagine if they were playing it at Raritan or Mid-South or wherever, and you're not filling up the gym. Well, okay, you could look at it two ways. Maybe it's the product, and maybe it's their fault, and they're not filling the gyms, or maybe there's not enough exposure given to them in the first place for people to even know about it. And, given the opportunity, like that's just what it comes down to for me. Just give them the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping, again, like now seeing the prevalence of the WNBA, like you see a lot of WNBA athletes and now female college basketball players that are appearing in, commercials for, Geico, Allstate, whatever it happens to be. Like they're on TV, like we're getting there. And NIL is a big thing, to sort of circle back to what you were saying about the financial aspect of it. But there's still a disparity. Like I don't know what the rule is. Yeah. I don't know what the rule is offhand, but I know on the men's side, there's like the one and done thing where, they can be off and do what they want to do. I think female collegiate basketball players have to play 3 years, if not 4 years, before they're eligible for the WNBA, which,
wow, I didn't know that.
Again, you run the risk of an ACL tear, Achilles, whatever it is. Like
100%. And
to say nothing of like the fact that so many of these WNBA players were, going overseas to play just to they're making $1 million playing in places they probably didn't want to go. It wasn't safe for them to be because they weren't getting anything here.
No,
but
that's true.
I don't know if you're familiar. I can't think of the name of the league. I don't know if it's undisputed. There was a 3-on-3 league that was started.
Yes.
For women's basketball, and I know Nafisha Collier just won the 1-on-1 game. She said she made like $200,000 for winning it. In 30 minutes, she made more than she made in the entire season with the WNBA, which is ridiculous. Great that the opportunity's there.
Yeah, great that she did it. But
hopefully this is going to sort of, springboard and find its way into more lucrative things and opportunities for them. Right. But like people don't realize like then you have scary. An NFL quarterback, like a mid-level top tier guy making $350 million. Shohei is probably the best baseball player I can think of, making, practically $1 billion.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? You don't even have to play that many seasons, and then you can go have kids and chill.
Right.
Like you can. And you're not even the one who's actually going to give birth to them. You can just go take care of them. And then you have like women who, are going to totally, I mean now, I'm a pelvic health therapist now. So as you were saying before, like a lot of what my passion is and a lot of who I work with is women who are trying to get back to Hoboken. I live in Hoboken. So Hoboken is a very big area for sports, for athleticism. And it's, fitness. It's a big fitness place. So a lot of these women have children and then they're trying to get back into running and biking and all of these things and they're having issues. So it really, and I can see now like how much it really does transform their bodies and how difficult it is for them to get back to where they want to be. And they can do it. They absolutely can. But they need, the resources and everything. But then at the same time, they're trying to breastfeed or they're not, but they're trying to take care of their child and all these things. So like to be like, oh, okay, I can go and be a professional athlete for this many years if I want kids. And then maybe I could eventually get back to it. But regardless, I'm probably not going to make enough money during that period of time to be like, okay, good, now I'm set to have children. Right. Whereas men have, I think, a little bit more wiggle room in that.
Yeah, and on the athletic side, there was just a scandal, I think within the WNBA, of a player who got pregnant, was assured that it wouldn't be an issue or whatever, and she either got cut or traded, whatever it was. There was definitely, something there. And that sucks because, what do you do? I don't know.
It's crazy.
The one thing that I'm happy about is I do see more documentaries like popping up and there's more stuff. There was a great one about the formation of the WNBA and the women's, Olympic team that sort of spurred that whole thing. So I'm hoping that with more information out there that people will, if not seek it out, at least sort of come upon it and just be educated because it's easy to think cynically that like there isn't as much support for women's sports or people working actively against it. And I'm sure there are people like that, but I do think genuinely that a lot of people just don't know about the state of things and hopefully they would 100%. Be willing to get in. But speaking of documentaries, another random memory flash, Is Dan a documentarian? Your brother?
He was doing that for a while. I think he had a couple of documentaries out there, but since the decision to have my nephew Parker, he started working for Deutsche Bank, so he does a lot of videos for them and stuff now. So,
that's cool.
Yeah, I think eventually he'll find his route back. But right now it was a little bit better for him, especially right after COVID. It made it a little bit easier for them to.
And I find on the creative front, like having kids just sends it to a different level. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was something that sparked, the passion again down the road.
Yeah, I can't imagine, especially, I mean, right now, like just the way they play, and Parker's only 2, and the imagination and everything. I'm excited to see what it will look like. And he has another one on the way, so.
Oh, congratulations. Oh, that's
you.
exciting.
Yeah.
So you seem to have taken, to the role of Aunt Nicole pretty well.
I love it. I've never been happier. He calls me Nini. He goes Nini or Nini. And both of them, I can't believe how much I love this kid. Like, I genuinely cannot believe how much I love this kid. And it's just like the greatest thing to hear to my ears is to be called that, and I love it. So.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So too young for sports affiliations yet, but I'm sure there'll be interests and stuff.
He loves hockey though. So he plays, they have a net, and he went to a Devils game. So
were you guys were you a divided household, or was everybody the fan of the same?
Yeah, everybody's a Devils fan in my house. So
okay.
Everyone's a Devils fan. And my parents at one point in time in my life had, like season tickets, and now they have season tickets again. And so that's why Parker got to go. And so he's funny because he'll look at you. He loves Jack Hughes. So he goes, Jack Hughes. It's so cute. And he's champs, let's go Devils. And so he has Devil sticks, he has Devils gear, he has Devils everything. So we're all really like really pushing the Devils here. So
I love it. It's funny. Well, the Devils have a special place in my heart because that's the first hockey game I took Heather to. So Heather she was like your typical Staten Islander who was a Yankees fan. I don't want to say Staten Island Yankees fan because that was a team at some point. But she just wasn't a huge sports person. So, through osmosis or just gradual exposure, she just got more into it. And I remember being really excited because it was my first time attending a hockey game. And it was a home game for the Devils against the Islanders. And within the first 90 seconds, the entire arena broke into a Rangers suck chant. And Heather was so confused because she's like, okay, I know there's a New York team. And I had to explain it. I was like, no, this is just a really deep-seated hatred here. Like, really, really deep. And then it's funny, I didn't realize that, so the kids' first hockey game was at Prudential for a Devils game too, because it was Star Wars night. And Heather's company at that time had tickets that they would give out to employees from time to time. So we got to go, they got to see Darth Vader, and we were right above the tunnel for the visiting team, maybe. I don't know. It was great seats, great experience.
That's
different
awesome.
Different attending a hockey game and trying to follow the puck without the aid of I forgot what they called it, but the thing that highlighted the puck on Channel 5 like 20 years ago. It was like a little laser light to make it easier for people to see it on TV.
I love it.
But that's cool. So it sounds like there's a lot of good stuff and exciting stuff coming up.
Which, talk about females, women's hockey has come so far. It's awesome. So I think you're absolutely right. I definitely think, even in talking to patients and stuff, people are, and there's a lot of men who are doing their part, right? They're like, oh, yeah, I got a bunch of my guys. We're going to, this game. We're going, even I work with a lot of Stevens athletes. There's a lot of guys who are like, oh, we're going to go to, the women's games. Right? So there's a lot of people who are out there, and they are doing their part to make it better, which I think is phenomenal. I just think it's taken time, but I really genuinely think that it's progressing that way. But yeah, women's hockey, man, they've done a lot to push themselves forward,
Oh, absolutely. And it's cool too, to see, do you know offhand if women's hockey is a varsity sport in Jersey? Because they're trying to make flag football a varsity sport. We have one, we have flag at Raritan, but I don't know if it counts as a varsity sport. I think it does. I think it's, whatever,
awesome.
certified, however that works. But I've noticed there's been a huge influx there. I know field hockey was big. I don't know if there's women's lacrosse, but I know women's hockey is definitely the hot topic or whatever lately. And it was actually at Madison Square Garden. Linda Cohn was in ESPN. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yes. Yeah.
she was a goalie, I think. So she was a huge women's hockey player. And unfortunately, I was coming back from the bathroom and I bumped into her and I was just like fanboy moment. So I asked for an autograph and then she shook my hand. My hand was wet because I washed it. And I was just like, oh God, I hope she doesn't think, it was a grosso or whatever. It was funny. She was really cool though. And like, that's another sport that, and again, right. So it all comes back to the marketability of it, right? So it's very easy to market women's beach volleyball based on aesthetics. It's very, very difficult to market, women stock car drivers or, women's hockey where they're all padded up and face masks and stuff and you can't see it. So I'm happy to see at least just the little influx of interest that's been coming and hopefully that continues to build because
Yeah, I hope so.
I want the interest to be there. So Sarah played on a flag football team and it killed me. I probably talked about it here too much, but it was the league was NFL sponsored, right? So it was different teams. So she was on the Broncos. So all the girls had matching orange, ribbons. They looked adorable. They were like ruthless. They were unbelievable. They went undefeated, made it to the Super Bowl. It was a heartbreaking game that they lost. But so many people were commenting more about their appearances and how cute they looked and all this kind of stuff before the games. Then after the games, walking off the field, you hear the dads bitching about, well, this wasn't fair. The girls should just play the girls teams because they were beating all boys teams. They were beating everybody. The Broncos actually sent a care package for the girls when they got wind of what was happening. So that was pretty
awesome.
neat. But yeah, no, it's so cool, like to see. Because again, hockey, football, those are, more masculinely viewed sports because of, I guess maybe it's just the contact of it, the violence of it, and it's not typically associated with women. But what's funny is I coached, you saw the pictures coming in, like all the basketball teams that I've coached or whatever, my girls' teams were always the most aggressive, always just the most physical out of all of them. So I always laugh when, people don't, think of female athletes as being as aggressive as boys.
Yeah. Now, do you see any difference? Question for you: do you see any difference between girls like Sarah who do have brothers, and then girls on the teams that maybe don't?
Not necessarily. I think it's more based on the parents and maybe the dads specifically in terms of like the support or whatever, because we pretty much have everything covered. So there's a girl who I would argue is the best basketball player, the best 7th grade basketball player in town. And she has an older sister and an older brother. So, so there's, and both played sports and, all different kinds of things. And we know plenty who are all girl households. So it's like a huge mix of things.
Awesome.
And the problem actually for me is when it's a girls only family, those are the ones that I worry about because the dads in more instances than not are a problem. They're the ones who have these weird, hang-ups, reliving their, glory days or worse, their failed dreams. They're trying to, relive through the daughters. So they have these unrealistic expectations of them. And like, I don't know, it's very upsetting. I've seen it in training. I've seen it all over the place. But again, the reason I had asked earlier about like if you notice any differences in treatment is we've seen it a lot from the referees at all different age groups, from when Sarah was 6 or 7, and we've caught games for high school or whatever. The things that they allow the girls to get away with traveling without correcting. When I say allow them to get away with, I mean without correcting it, like they would in a boys' game, like letting a girl run with the ball or double dribble or whatever, and it's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, ref the game. And like one time, I remember, so Sarah's lucky enough to play for Sarah Dessner. So Sarah is the founder of the Shore Aces AU program, and she's an assistant coach at Georgian Court University. Okay. So she's like a big time coach, and very, very, very like great female role model, like female only coaching staff, like very pro, female sports. And there was one game where whoever we were playing, the referee, like, I think the girl traveled, and the ref didn't even like blow the whistle. He stops. He's like, okay, honey, this is what you did wrong. Here, take it out and try again. And Sarah like flipped shit. She was like, what the fuck? Like, that's not what you do. Like, you whistle it. And if you want to point her out, what she did wrong, go for it. But like, he treated her, and this was like, whatever, I guess like a 5th or 6th grade, treating them like a 5 or 6 year old.
Right.
And so it was crazy. But for you,
that's crazy.
Soccer wise, especially like I don't know too much about the programs. I know there's like PDA, I think, is a big one. There's another one with an E that I'm blanking on, but there's a couple of different programs that I feel like the level, they're just a built-in level of competitiveness to get into those programs.
Yeah.
The quality of the competition that they're playing, I can't imagine that the refereeing is going to be that drastically different.
Yeah, no, I think I was mostly on and again, like, I think things have really changed. So PDA is still living on. I don't think the academy I ended up on even still exists, but at the time it was like, you had rec, you had club, and then you had your academies. So I was playing in the academy group, and I think that for the most part, and again, also another part of, like, especially women's soccer women's soccer for me at the time period that I was growing up in Monmouth County, it was also like my parents were able to spend the money that needed to be spent in order for me to, get to the place that I needed to go and all that stuff. So I think that the reffing there was always pretty good, just because of the fact that it came from, you these academies that were supposed to be like, really professional coaches, coaches who had played professionally, who were like funding this business and kind of thing. But so I don't know that I saw too much of that. I also think that, like I said, I think soccer, just because of the fact that it's been such a big sport in New Jersey for a long time, I think also plays a role in the fact that I didn't see too much of that.
Right. And I guess I should point out too that, like, I guess the default lens that I'm having these discussions through when it comes to sports is a suburban one, because I would imagine it's even worse or more disparate in an urban setting, and again, too, to sort of harken back to the, societal pressures and social, specifically, like, challenges. It's different being a girl, and especially being an inner city girl. I've told the story, I think recently too, on here, about when I was student teaching in Gramercy. So Gramercy is like one of the most bougie parts of Manhattan, but the kids all came from the worst parts of the city. So the neighborhoods that had the worst reputations, that's where they were from. Some kids had probation officers. There was always gang fights. There's a lot of crazy shit that was going on there. And the story that I had referenced specifically was you weren't allowed to wear, like, hats because there was gang affiliations and things like that. I don't remember what the specific issue was with putting their heads down on the desk, but that was a rule too. And my cooperating teacher pulled me aside and was like, hey, there's a girl, she's already in class, she's going to be probably sleeping the whole time, just leave her alone, like, it's okay, don't say anything, just carry on. Like, oh shit, okay. Like, and sure enough, she was there. And I got the full story after the fact that she had been on the street since 1 that morning, and it just kept getting worse. So she had been on the street since 1 that morning, just literally wandering around. So she had come into school. Thankfully, she came to school. So that's why she was so exhausted. But the reason she was on the street was because her grandmother, who she lived with, kicked her out at whatever. It kicked her out because she found out that she had an abortion. She was 15 or 16. And it's like, so just thinking of, like, the sports side of it, we take it for granted, or I think I take it for granted here, that, like, sports is a default thing. It's, a big part of our lives, but for some people it's a luxury. And like you mentioned, sorry, that's what made me think of it. Like, the travel costs and all the things that go into it. It's hard enough here. I can only imagine what it's like in cities or just areas that aren't as, financially well off as they are in the suburbs. So.
100%. Like, even just, like, the fact that I got to go to Rift and be able to, actually I went to the Edge, which I think was like what became of Rift. To be honest, I don't really know the story there, but the Edge was like not too far down the road, and it was a very similar thing, and I believe Sharon was there too, and so I went there. But yeah, like, I mean, my parents were able to, afford that for me, which was really great. But, speed training, things like that, you get that on top of, being part of a coaching staff, and having the facilities and stuff. So I think, that's why I probably didn't run into as many issues as some of the athletes that I talk to now who are my athletes, because of the fact that, I grew up here and my parents had the ability to do that for me.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, like, I'm happy and frustrated in equal measures, right? Especially on the female side of things. So I had the kids enrolled in the Nike basketball camp. It was based out of Princeton.
Awesome.
Sarah did it for 2 years. The boys did it for 1, and there's a story there. So Sarah had a really great experience when she went. She was one of maybe 50 girls that were there. I can't give you the exact number offhand, but I think it was something like that. The coaching staff, shout out to Coach James, the Black Viking, and Coach Jay Green, who ran it. They were awesome. It was male and female coaches, which is another thing too. Like, I love to see intergender coaching.
Me too.
And I wish there were more female coaches for boys. There's plenty of male coaches for girls, but I would love to see more female coaches for boys, because if you're asking the question of like, gee, I wonder how my son would react to having a female coach or trainer, you can go somewhere else. And so for the Nike camp, like, Sarah stood out more than I think she should have, just because of the dearth of sort of competition. Like, I know she was excited because she won like a knockout competition, and it was her and a high school senior. So she won against a 17-year-old, which was really cool.
That's so cool.
She had such a great experience. They loved her. So we decided to bring her back the next year. That year, she wound up winning Camper of the Year, like for Nike. And I was just like, that's it. We got to go out on top. We're done. It was, I mean, to be honest, like, I was basically driving like to Boston every day, because it's an hour there. It's over an hour there, then over an hour back, and then doing that, to go pick her up. It was too much. The boys, though, and again, the level of attention and care that she got from the coaching staff in general, male and female, was top notch. She learned a lot. It was a great experience. The boys, it was a clusterfuck. They were, and not because of the coaches, not because of the way it was run. They were just too many kids. There was like almost 300 boys.
Holy shit.
And so, so the number of reps they were getting, everything was just different. And again, like, it just frustrates me because, again, like, there should have been 300 girls there. It's not like there's not, that many interested in basketball or whatever. So that's the change that over the next 10 years, I hope we see. It's just a volume issue. Because again, I had on both sides, same coaches, and I knew that they were doing the same things. I heard the same stories from the kids. So like, kudos to them for, holding the standard high and being able to, to treat them the same. But now we just have to get more girls, involved and for longer, and to realize like, it shouldn't be mutually exclusive. Yeah. You should be able to juggle and balance both things. And 100%. I'm hoping that's more of a norm now. But again, I see a lot of girls, even locally. It's kind of sad, like by the middle school. Sarah made the middle school basketball team. And so many of the girls that I thought would have wanted to try out or play, they're in the stands. They're wearing makeup and worried more about, the little clique that they're running with than they are the athletic side.
Well, I think too, like, you had brought up a point before. You had asked, did I have friends who I really played with, and then all of a sudden they dropped off. Another thing about that is bodies, like, right? Like, bodies in general, like, go through that period of time where, girls are a little awkward. They, all of a sudden have weight gain, or, all of a sudden they're like, hey, it really hurts when I run. And, and I think there's different changes that go through, but I hope that there is a little bit more education and a little bit more about, like, that's also a time period. Like, at some point that's also going to level out too. There's not always going to be this period of time where you're in this way, like, this isn't your body forever kind of thing. Like, you're going through super intense, and I think there's education on that, don't get me wrong, but probably not in relation to actually fitness levels and health levels and everything. I wish, like, I could go back to that girl who kind of went through a period of time where it was like, oh, am I getting, like, too heavy to play soccer, right? Like, I wish she, I was a fast kid, and then I wasn't the fastest anymore, and I think just education on the fact that that's going to level out at some point too. You know what I mean? Like, right now, and, like, I even hear myself say it to my patients right now, my high school patients. It's like, the kid comes in and he's like, yeah, but, like, I used to be so fast and so tall, and now I'm, like, short and not, and whatever. And I'm like, dude, you might be just growing at a different rate, right? And I think men, like boys hear that a lot more. Like, oh, well, you might grow more, or you might get faster, or your agility might get better, or you can outbeat that, or you could do whatever. For girls, it's kind of like, yeah, this is a hard time, sorry. But nobody's like, yeah, but give it 5 years, dude, and you might actually be super fast. You know what I mean? Like, right now, your body's going through so many weird changes. You're tired, you're not tired, you're angry, you're not angry. Like, give it, like, a couple years. So just, like, stick through this. And if you tell me at 17, you're like, okay, I really hate this still. Like, I'm not doing well. I'm not successful in it. It's not good for me. That's a different story than 13, right? 12, like 11, that age where it's just, there's so many changes going on. Like, don't throw another change in there. Like, just accept the fact that for the next couple of years, you might not be the same body that you're going to be.
I love everything you said. That's definitely going to make one of the shorts, the YouTube shorts, because like to a certain extent, right? I think of like the androgyny of youth, right? So girls and boys look very similar, size wise, frame wise, shape, all of it, like 6, 7, 8, 9. Then, like you said, there's a point where that shifts. And I'm not sure if that's the specific point. Like, to be honest, I would love to see more intergender, like, competitive sports, especially basketball. Like, it's funny. We have friends who have daughters who wrestle, and it was fine up to a certain point. And it's fine for them, weirdly enough. But, like, it's become an issue with the boys because now, she's 11, 12, 13, and all the grappling and everything.
Yeah.
It's different. And a weird part, just as, like, a quick aside, like, the language involved, like, in terms of, like, fans, like, do you really want to have this, almost adult, like, you're telling them to hold her down, pin her down, like, it's just, it becomes weird after a certain point. And so for girls, developmentally, right, like, adolescence sucks in general, right? It's just all these changes, the hormones, and, I mean, it's like an out-of-body experience half the time because you just, minute to minute, you're all, just going through all these different things. And it's, it's bad enough for the boys. It's got to be 1,000 times harder for the girls because your bodies are being primed for life bearing. Like, that's a hell of a lot more of a catastrophic adjustment 100%. Than what boys are going through. 100%. Number one. And then two, again, this is another thing. Like, I should probably watch through all these episodes and see how many times I've said certain things. But, like, I always say boys grow like Christmas trees, right? Because all of a sudden we kind of, like, get big and then we shoot up and we're skinny again. And then, hopefully that does stop at the top and just doesn't keep going. But with girls, it's different. Like, just the body type can vary so dramatically, even within a family, from one woman to the next. And then also where the body fat tends to deposit, it would affect something like speed and agility and stuff, right? Because it's more in the upper body and then in the thighs, the rear, like, so it's harder for girls, I think, to adapt to that if they're used to being slender and super fast. And now maybe they're not. I love what you said about it just being like a temporary thing. Like, okay, like you can get through it. Or to bring in, and I'm not a huge advocate of like heavyweight training for younger adolescents.
Yeah, no, I think
it's detrimental. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just incorporating that. So again, I had Sarah do ripped, and I remember I wanted her to do it more from a footwork standpoint because she looked like she was running with like wooden shoes on. Like, she was always the last one up the court, and it wasn't because she was heavy or slow. It was just, she just looked awkward to my eye. And so I hoped that ripped would help her with that. But what ripped really helped her with was getting ripped. Like, by the end of it, I think she was doing squats with a 50-pound dumbbell. And she was like, it was great. I never thought of that sort of strength training being an option for kids of that age. Yeah. And so the point is, if you're having, sort of like body development concerns, let's say, because a certain area isn't looking the way you want it to, or it's becoming a problem, like, you can train for that. Like, obviously that's not how fat loss works. You can't just target it, but you can at least try to offset it with some toning, doing more, full body lifting maneuvers and stuff. So
it's true. No, there's definitely a lot of changes that can occur at that age in terms of just weight training, like you said, like talking about like clumsiness, things like that. And I mean, I see it in PT, and I'm thankful every time I get somebody who comes in and their parents are like, hey, they're kind of like, I just don't know how to explain it. Like, they don't really have pain, but they kind of have achingness or something. And there's like, right. And I just go through like a total, like, and really all I do is I go through an assessment of risk of injury, right? Risk of injury assessment. And then I look at them, and there's just times where it's just like, all right, like the weight that you're carrying is just so different that your body hasn't figured out like how to hold it yet. But there's little things like teaching stretching form. All of a sudden men's, hamstrings get like so tight, right? As they start to, like you said, as they start to like lean out and sprout up. So like, and they're still stretching the same way they always did, which is this like rounded posture, right? And I'm like, oh, you're just stretching your back. You're not even stretching your hamstrings. Like, so no wonder it still hurts. And there's like all these little things that can, if we really take the time to focus on these kids, just in going on a side note of like risk assessment and injury prevention, on top of the fact that, you're teaching these girls like, hey, you're just like going through this weird time where you just don't really know what's happening to your body, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I think Sharon mentioned both in just general conversation and when she was here that, like, I believe females are at a greater risk of ACL tears at a certain age, which I had no idea. I would have never even guessed it. If you asked, I would have assumed it was the males just because of the, the violence of the movements or whatever it happened to be. So I thought that was really interesting. Like, and just hearing all this and thinking about it, like in real time, like I wish there was a resource out there for families, but also for girls of that age to sort of like understand, like, hey, look, these are things that you can expect to happen as, you're 10 or 11. Okay, so these are some things, 12, 13, 14. Like, and maybe it could be part of like a health class, right, in school, because so much is focused on like just the typical, again, the 1950s health version, but like to modernize it, like, because there are a lot of female athletes that, maybe if they had that information, maybe they'd make different decisions to continue, in the long run.
Yeah. Also, too, I think it is another spin on trying to get, like, right, how many kids sit in health class and, like, actually pay attention to all of the health class, right? So, like, if you put a spin on it, like, hey, here's a risk injury assessment, here's, like, here's what can be happening to your body and how it could affect daily things, right? Like, instead of just, like, oh, in the future, this could happen, or these could, like, I almost wish that that could be, like, maybe a sign of health class where, like, okay, you guys care about sports? Here we go. Like, let's tie that into it. So, right. Maybe there would be more kids paying attention, because it's like, oh, like maybe that's a reason why I have some of these things or whatever it may be. But that's just an idea.
And you just sparked the teacher gene in me with that, because that's like my goal. You can never reach every kid, right? And there's such an emphasis and importance on differentiated learning and learning styles. Like, so I don't know what your experience was like in school growing up, but like we still had the blackboards and chalk and all that kind of stuff. And so most of it, especially in high school, was notes. It was, the teachers writing stuff on the board. We were writing it down and rote learning essentially. And there are just different learners. They learn visually, they learn kinesthetically, they learn, through hearing versus viewing it or whatever it is. And so I was always thinking, all right, how can I reach the most kids? Or if I know I have this pocket of kids, okay, I can do this part of the lesson this way or that way. And so I love the idea of, and especially if it's something that's quote unquote boring, right? Like if it's something that I think they're going to tune out from, well, is the material itself the issue, or is it the presentation? And 9 times out of 10, it's just how it's presented. And so I love what you said. Like, maybe there's a way to sort of like, hey, we can talk about these things and not have it be like contrived, like, oh, we're going to put on a skit and talk about, the birds and the bees. Like, it doesn't have to be hackneyed like that. Like, you can, take certain aspects or elements of it and tie it to sports or tie it to things that people are interested in, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is cool. Yeah, what was your high school sports experience a good one? Just out of curiosity, like, do you feel like you learned, anything in school, or all of your sports development was done outside of school, really?
Yeah, I think I did. No, I definitely learned a lot. I think I went through some trying times for me in high school in terms of athletics, but I think I learned a lot. And I think the biggest thing that I learned was tenacity. Like, I am super tenacious, and I think that it was a really important part. Like, again, here we go with the whole, like, I think you end up where you're supposed to be. I think my journey was what it needed to be in order to be the person I am. And, I wasn't super fast, and I also had a lot of anxiety. So for me, running, crazy enough, used to be such an anxiety-ridden thing for me. I think that's probably why now I love the fact that I'm like so
anxiety-inducing, not
yes.
Oh wow, okay.
Yes, it was an anxiety-inducing thing for me.
Oh wow,
for sure. So just because I wasn't as fast as a lot of people, and I think my fitness level wasn't always where everybody else was. Where I was a good soccer player was mentally, right? I could see the field. That was the biggest thing that college coaches, when I did get recruited, was like, you see things, right? And it shows because I was a center defensive mid, right? And that is the position. You are seeing the field, you're trying to figure it out. And then I was good at getting the ball where needed to go. But my athleticism wasn't my strong suit. So for me, anytime there was anything in regards to just fitness and you took the mental aspect out of it, right? You took away the thing that and I was strong too. So just running a mile or running 120s or something like that, a fitness test like that, you took out what made me a good player, and what people also told me made me a good player was another piece.
Which is probably more the second thing than the first pickup. But
exactly. So, I think there was always oh God, this is so, not only is it hard, but I'm not good at this. Like, I knew that every single time we started. So for me, I couldn't make varsity because I couldn't make a mile under 6:45. I made it in like 6:55, which is still amazing. Time. Right. Yeah, right. And I just couldn't make it. And thankfully, by I think my senior year, I finally was like, nah, I'm gonna do it. And I have to say that my high school coach at the time, we didn't really have the greatest relationship, because I definitely think that she didn't know me very well, and I think she realized that by my senior year, because I went from, not playing on varsity at all, and to all of a sudden now I'm a starter, and she's relying on me 24/7, as a center defender. And at the end, she did say to me, I misunderstood. Like, you're extremely tenacious. I misunderstood you. So, and it was all anxiety. Like, and I didn't pick that out. So she was really, really great in the end. But I think during those 4 years, I was going and I was playing on teams that were really, really good, academy teams, at showcases with all of these girls who were starting on high school teams,
right,
varsity teams, and I wasn't, because I couldn't run a 6:45 mile.
Right.
And so, and like I said, by junior year it was different, because I had figured out how to get that piece. But my freshman and my sophomore year, I probably should have been somewhere that I wasn't, because I couldn't run that.
And I think that's sort of the core thing here is, like, I think girls aren't as primed to succeed athletically because there's not enough encouragement and not enough support and not enough time taken to understand them individually, and to see what their needs are or whatever. Because again, the default focus is on the boys, which is super unfortunate and unnecessary. Like, I don't know.
It's true. Although I do like what you said about the fact that, like, it would be nice to have some female coaches starting to intermingle into the male side of things, because at the same token, I do think that there is still a little bit of a problem with the fact that I have male athletes that come to me all the time, right? And they don't even know that I talk to their coaches and their trainers, right? Because of just for health standpoints and like what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, right? So they come to me and they're really open about telling me things, right? And there is a side of that's missed, that, like, and I'm not saying that a male coach can't be that for men, but I do think that we're missing something by not having a female coach be like a secondary piece to that, because, right, I think there are times where young boys are more willing to come to a female coach and be like, my one patient to be said the other day, like, I just have so much anxiety when I start the game, and then I know I'll have anxiety through the entire game, and like, it's really hard to focus on anything else when you just have anxiety. And like, he's not telling his coach that, you know what I mean?
Right.
But he just came here and he told me that. So I think there's something to be said for if there was somebody there, who is a part of it, who's looking at that going, hey, at the start of the game, like, hey, I know that about that kid. And like, hey, like, let's do something in these 5 minutes before the game starts that you can like really center on the game and like stop worrying about everything, Yeah.
And the communication side of it, I think, is really critical, right? And like, women are stereotypically viewed as soft and caring and nurturing, and that is an inherent element, undeniably, right? But in the same way that, like, when people compliment women's basketball because of the fundamentals and all that, like, yeah, it's a compliment, but then you're discrediting the athleticism, you're discrediting these other things. And so in the situation of having a female coach for a boys basketball team, like, women are a hell of a lot tougher, in my opinion, than men are, because they deal with a hell of a lot more physically, just across the board, right? So that tenacity that you have, that a lot of these women have, like, that's something that I think is, like, yes, they're going to see that in their male coaches, but to see it in a female coach, I think it's more of an educational opportunity for boys to view women maybe differently than they have to that point.
Yeah.
And still get the same value, still get the same lessons, but have it from a different voice and a different perspective.
That is true. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it would be awesome if that definitely happened more. And truth be told, I know you had said, like, I do think there would be a lot of young boys who are very open to that too. You know what I mean? Like, I think you're seeing generational differences in people and styles, and I think that if anything, they might be like, oh yeah, she's a badass. Like, right. like my coach is a badass. Like, that's what I think they'd be hyped about it, to be honest.
I would hope so, because again, it comes down to these stupid default settings or just these expectations, right? Like, another reason why I think I would love to see more girls encouraged to continue, right? Because that's the problem. They're not just quitting; they're being allowed to quit. They're being allowed or insidiously encouraged to quit and drop out, right? And what bothers me is, yeah, maybe they're not going to play professionally. Maybe they may not even play in college, but why not give them the opportunity, if they love the sport or to fall in love with the sport? There are other career opportunities. You can be a team physical therapist, a team doctor. You can work for, like, there are so many more women or female NFL coaches now than ever before. Yeah. I don't know if there's any strength and conditioning coaches, but it's not like, but there may be. And
yeah, no, I think one of the NHL teams, I'm pretty sure does. I think they came out and they said that they're one of their strength coaches.
Right, and why? Like, that's my attitude. Why not? Who cares? Like, what difference does it make?
Doesn't.
Now, I say all that. Clearly, there are instances where the gender is an issue. Like, so for me, like, I wouldn't feel as comfortable as a male coach entering like a girls' locker room, right? So, for example, I filled in so Sarah's travel coach is a woman, and I filled in for her one time, and it was halftime, and we were supposed to go into the girls' locker room, and nobody was assisting me, and I was just like, okay, the teacher in me was like, all right, this is not, we need to have the door open, or, like, whatever. And in the same way that, like, it's probably awkward for a female head coach to be in the male locker room or whatever, but that's probably like the one instance that, like, that might be an issue. But from a technical standpoint, from a coaching, acumen and all that, it doesn't matter.
No.
And I think it's a benefit in the same way, just to sort of close it out, because I feel bad taking up all of your day off here, in the same way that, like, you have so much inspiration and passion and everything from your dad because he's your dad, right? Because of that specialness of that bond. Yeah. So many of these kids are getting robbed of something comparable when they're not paired with coaches or mentors of a different gender. Like,
that's true.
So I don't know. That's something that I hope will change. But no, it's I'm always inspired talking to you, and I appreciate, again, I'm sorry that I took up so much of your time.
No,
to do that.
You know me, I could literally talk for hours.
Yeah, but this was great. And one of my hopes with doing, the podcast or whatever is that somebody hearing it comes away with, something, like, that they feel inspired or, want to learn more about something or try something new or whatever. And you checked off so many boxes for so many people. I can't wait to go through this and sort of listen to it again, because I had a lot of fun.
Me too.
And I think it was really good. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's like, it was so cool when you reached out to me. I was like, this is awesome, just to catch up with you, to talk about stuff that we're passionate about again, but also too, just like I said, the people that you've had on your podcast, right, have been mentors of mine, they've been coaches of mine, they've been bosses of mine, they've been, right, so interconnected to my life, and have been, all of them have been a small, or if not large, portion of me becoming who I am today. So I am honored to be even talking to you in regards to the fact that they were those people.
And that's so wild, because outside of the one connection with Sue, I didn't even realize that. So that's so cool. And again, that's my point with doing this, like, more than anything else, is it's the people connection. I'm a people person in general. That's why COVID was so brutal, like, just losing out on, like, the socializing and just interacting, with people literally face to face. And so when I have people like you or Jay or Sharon and Bobby and Sue, like, people who inspire me, Christine from ProCare, like, when they inspire me, I'm like, okay, this is going to resonate with people, and I want to be able to shine some light on them too, because they've had an impact on me. So you're one of those people as well. And I am. I'm so appreciative that you took the time to come and chat with me. And I can't wait to hear about whatever adventures you have coming up. Hopefully, I know it's tough, right? You said 29, it comes at you fast. It's a lot harder to take that time to go and travel with all the bills and all the other shit.
Yeah, that's rough.
But if anybody's going to make it happen, I know it's you. And so hopefully the wedding season slows down a little bit. You can take some time for yourself. But thank you to Nicole for coming and chatting today. And thank you for everybody listening wherever and whenever you are.